Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, that game had just about everything you could want in a Chargers loss, except it was a Chargers win.
Yeah, what a beautiful disastrophe.
That was it had everything. Incredible. It even had a holy roller.
Yeah, right? Against the team that the holy roller was invented for. Like, it was perfect, right?
That's like when the tuck rule comes into play in a Patriots Raiders game.
Yeah, no, exactly. It was perfect. I can't believe that the holy roller rule came into effect, and it would have been so funny. Like, obviously it didn't happen because at some point you can't always charge her, I guess, but it would have been so funny if that's what would have swung the game. Because if they don't get in on the next one, they kick the field goal, and Mariota just like throws a game winner to Darren Waller or something like that. Like, then it would have been like, oh my God, the holy roller rule like mattered again. Oh my God. But instead, it's just kind of like a fun note.
Yeah, this for those who didn't end up watching the Thursday night game, you missed something fun. Like the Monday night game was a great shootout and had a fun little bit of controversy at the end of it. This was just a fun game, unless you were Derek Carr's groin. Like, this was a really fun game to sit and watch because Marcus Mariota came out to replace Derek Carr when he got hurt. And it managed to encapsulate everything that people loved about Marcus Mariota and everything they hated about Marcus Mariota. It was perfect. It was beautiful. It was all the reasons you pay Mariota that much money to be your backup quarterback. And it was a great game. It was fun. The Raiders defense is terrible. The Chargers, you keep wondering why they are at their record, and then you remember they're the Chargers. And it ended up going into overtime. And how you didn't... The Chargers had no answer at all for the option. Like, that whole game. Marcus Mariota was just running all over him. Why did you not use Mariota in that, like, first, second, or third and goal option? Why not do that?
I don't know. It was pretty wild. I was just on a podcast with Kevin Cole from PFF called Unexpected Points, and which is a great podcast name for like an analytics podcast. And at one point I brought up that, like, hey, so it really does seem like when the backup is significantly more athletic than the starting quarterback, and the starting quarterback goes down to injury, and the backup starts scrambling or running or optioning, that defenses don't know how to handle it, and maybe I'm just overexposed to Joe Webb. But this seems like this always happens, because it had happened in just earlier this week. We were just talking about another game where this happened. Jalen Hurts, Carson Wentz, yeah. And the defense just had no idea how to deal with the fact that Jalen Hurts was a running threat. And although Carson Wentz is reputed to be like a super athlete, a quarterback, Hurts is just a significantly better athlete, and they were using that. And I was just like, why don't teams just do this more often? Just like actually, and not for like a play or two where it's weird and that they're going to run, but for like drives where they could run or throw, because these backups are going to be forced to throw the ball in those situations. And that seems to work for them, right? Like we saw what Joe Webb did against the Lions. We saw what Jalen Hurts did. We saw just now what Mariota did. They just didn't prep for the option. And obviously, as that happens more often, teams are going to prep for that. But it's just like wild to me. And then also, when you hear interviews with like good teams, with individual players about like, oh, how did you prepare for this? You didn't even know he was going to be in. And they say, well, that's not the point. We prep for everybody. We go through the entire depth chart. We have a plan for everybody in that we might play. Like when I was talking to Stephen Weatherly about how Andre Patterson prepares edge rushers, Stephen Weatherly was saying, oh, no, we have notes on every single offensive tackle or potential offensive tackle that will play. We even have notes on if the tight end is forced to play, right? Like we know what their tendencies are as a blocker. And then you go to like a bad defense and you see they didn't even have a plan for if the backup quarterback was in, like at all. Yeah, wild.
Yeah, this was quite the fun game. It had 2 missed field goals by the Chargers kicker. It had Dan Carlson in it scoring points.
Yeah, Daniel Carlson, which, man, we could have really used a Daniel Carlson game winner. That would have been so great for Vikings Twitter.
Yeah, just one more thing. Just one more Vikings kicker thing to deal with. So, and with that, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are ready to enjoy it. We have plenty of stuff to talk about, including a rematch with the Bears, which will be discussed with a friend of the pod, Lauren Cox. We also have a mailbag to go through as well. But before we start off with that, just want to thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code, for sharing links on social media, for donating to the show. If you do appreciate what you hear, and you hear value in the content that we produce twice a week during the regular season, you can donate to the show. You can do so in one of two different ways. You can go to patreon.com/Norse Code and donate there for $3.50 a month. You can get access to the bonus episodes that are posted. You also get access to things like when we do the Zoom live show, which we did a couple weeks ago, or last week. Time means nothing in 2020 anymore, or rather, I don't think it ever did in 2020, but here we are. We are also doing a live watch-along on Zoom for the final game of the year against the Lions. So, if you are interested in such things on January 3rd, please join us, and you can do so at patreon.com/NorseCode and click on the link that will be provided there. Or you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up your stocking stuffers. Yes, let's go stocking stuffers. The random bits of Norse Code t-shirts, swag, and everything else. Speaking of, the swag that I sent out to the Patreon people appears to have reached its destination for the most part, international people notwithstanding, and the large item was received by...
Definitively not a stocking stuffer.
Definitely not. You have to be one hell of a stocking. The large item was received by Kyle Slaby. He ended up winning a little drawing I had held here. I had like 4 names I could go through, and after hitting the random button like 86 times, I ended up getting Kyle Slaby. So Slaby got it, and he took a picture of it. He put it on social media. It was a large, printed out, mounted tweet from the. Was it the 38-7? Was that the score? I haven't had Philly fans in my mentions in a while.
Yeah, it was 38-7, yeah.
Yeah, it was the 38-7 loss, and it was the death created time to grow things that it would kill. So it was the actual just framed...
An iconic tweet of yours that just has not gotten the attention it deserves.
I'm not claiming I wrote the line, but I am saying I tweeted it out and named an episode after it, so... but Slaby ended up getting that, so that was the large object. I have heard from a couple people had sent pictures of what they received, including I believe Adam Bryant sent out the picture of the card.
The Josh Freeman card.
The Josh Freeman card.
I can't believe they made a Josh Freeman and a Vikings jersey card. That's just incredible commitment to the industry.
And not just a Josh Freeman card. It wasn't just like a picture. This was like painting. Somebody was commissioned to do this painting of Josh Freeman in a Vikings uniform. Just mad. If I can find another one of those on eBay, which I think I can, I might need to have that for next year. Maybe we can set up some sort of like a Secret Santa thing or something, and everyone can torment Don from Ohio in one way or another. Looking at that bingo thing he got me for the live show now, just seeing that in the corner of my eye. It's being illuminated by the lamp. So, but again, norsecode.threadless.com if you're interested in such shenanigans. But now that we are back into the regular show, let's go to a preview of the Bears matchup with friend of the pod, Lauren Cox.
All right. I'm here with the tallest 17-year-old covering the Bears, Lauren Cox, who I always forget kind of what I'm supposed to say that he does, but he does the Locked On Bears podcast, and I'm sure some other things that we can talk about.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, that's kind of the main one. I appreciate the introduction, albeit insult after insult to begin, but clearly kind of starting off on the right foot with the Bears-Vikings rivalry. So I understand.
Yeah, so obviously, after the Vikings beat the Bears due to the Akeem Hicks injury halfway through the game, the Vikings are obviously going to win this matchup, but it does behoove us to talk about the individual players playing, unfortunately, for both teams. I'm sure both of them, both sets of players would prefer a different kind of scenario, but here we are. And I think I want to start with the defense first, just because Khalil Mack appeared on the injury report as a did not participate after being a full participant on Wednesday. Is there anything at all you know about that?
I don't know much. I know Wednesday was sort of a light walkthrough where they didn't do a real practice because they had a weird situation where for some reason their COVID tests that morning weren't delivered to the testing facility. The team didn't really know what happened. So they had to push practice back into the evening and redo their whole schedule. So it was kind of one of those, like, Thursday night football games where they say it's sort of like an estimated practice participation where what really wasn't the full thing. So the bigger thing with Khalil Mack is just that he's been on the injury report and hasn't practiced much in the last, I guess, month or so. I mean, every single week it's like he misses 2 or 3 practices and is questionable for the game and hasn't really missed any time up to this point. So it's just kind of little things throughout the season. And at this point, you're always never 100% sure, but you feel like he's been able to kind of power through thus far and should, in theory, be able to go on Sunday.
All right. And then the 3 other DNPs are also defensive. Buster Skrine, Jalen Johnson. Yeah, I always get his name. Jalen Johnson and Deon Bush.
So Buster Skrine suffered a concussion 2 weeks ago and is still in the concussion protocol. That one is a very real concern.
Wow.
Especially slot cornerback against the Minnesota Vikings team that loves to move those receivers into the slot. That's, I think, concern number 1 for me with this Bears defense in this game. But then Jalen Johnson suffered the injury last week against the Texans, and Bears keep calling him day-to-day and probably going to be a game-time decision there. And normally their fill-in on the outside is Buster Skrine moving over from the slot. So they're potentially relying on, if neither of those guys can go, they have to call somebody up off the practice squad because they only have 5 cornerbacks on the roster right now. And it's a rookie 5th-round pick, Kindle Vildor, elite name. And then last year's 6th-round pick, Duke Shelley, would probably be the go-to in the slot there. So very real concern in the secondary.
And your level of confidence in elite name Kindle Vildor and I suppose not worthy enough to mention level of recognition named Duke Shelley?
Well, Kindle Vildor is making the transition from the esteemed football program Georgia Southern, so I don't know that he's going to be ready for significant NFL snaps. It wouldn't surprise me if they go with one of their safeties like DeAndre Houston Carson trying to play a lot of those slot snaps, and then Duke Shelley kind of playing on the outside. I think I'm still a little bit more concerned for the slot than the outside, but I think it's a very real level of like, oh man, what do the Bears do if both Jalen Johnson and Buster Skrine are out? Because it could be pretty ugly at those spots.
All right, well, we're already talking about the secondary. Let's talk a little bit about Kyle Fuller, who at least had a very strong first half of the season. I don't know how he's playing right now. I'm sure that you can enlighten me. Eddie Jackson and Tashawn Gibson.
Yeah, so same old for Kyle Fuller. I mean, he's been kind of that same steady guy. He gave up a big touchdown a couple of weeks ago against the Lions, and that's kind of only been the one big play this season that he's really been out of position for. It's kind of your standard off coverage, and he's going to allow some catches in front of him, and he's going to step up and make the tackle. He's been very good in run defense. He's delivered some really big hits and has had a little bit of a reputation now as a thumper at the cornerback spot. So that's been encouraging to see. He's not playing Pro Bowl caliber cornerback play, hasn't really had the turnovers that we've seen from him in years past, but he gets the job done, certainly. Eddie Jackson has been a little bit of a disappointment after looking like a Pro Bowl, a perennial Pro Bowl safety a couple of years ago. He's missed a lot of tackles. That's always been an issue with him, but it seems to just kind of get worse and worse, where he just kind of throws his shoulder and throws his body at people. He's still very reliable in deep coverage, and he doesn't get targeted a ton. He generally does his job. He just hasn't been up to the same billing that we came to expect from him. And then Tashawn Gibson is kind of just a guy, a veteran starting safety in the league, never going to make big plays, but never going to be terribly out of position. He's just sort of he's just there. He fills in, he does his job. You don't really hear much about him, which means he's not doing much well, but he's not doing much bad either.
All right. Classic defensive back analysis from Lauren Cox. You don't hear his name. Must not be too bad.
He's not missing big tackles. He's not making big plays. I mean, you watch him in coverage, and The Bears do a lot of 2 deep shells, and then they'll rotate to single deep. And when he's underneath, he's in the right spot for the most part. And when he's deep, he's in the right spot for the most part. He just quietly does his job, and it works.
Didn't just to go a little bit off beat here, didn't DeAndre Houston Carson have like a wild game not too long ago? What's up with him?
He had back-to-back game-sealing plays 2 weeks in a row earlier in the season. It was the Buccaneers and Panthers, I believe. It wasn't an interception to Tom Brady on the last play of the game, but it was like 4th down coverage, and he was right there. I think he dropped the pick, if I remember correctly. And then the following week, it was the last play of the game against the Panthers, which I believe it was an actual interception that he made there against Teddy Bridgewater to seal or end any sort of potential comeback they were attempting.
Are his long-term prospects good, or is that just going to be the DeAndre Houston Carson legacy?
Yeah, that's for now. It's the DeAndre Houston Carson legacy. I mean, over the course of the season, I was going to try and filibuster and pull up his total snap counts for you here. He's played 57 snaps in 9 games. So like he comes in as the dime defensive back number 5. He and Deion Bush, the other safety who's on the injury report, they've played a combined like 120 snaps this season. They only come in on like the 1-3-6 package on 3rd and long. And both of them have been pretty darn good filling in that kind of third safety slot role, but it's a very, very small factor in the defense as a whole that just was kind of put in the spotlight for 2 big plays earlier.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's talk about that linebacker unit. We'll talk about the edge defenders separately. So Roquan Smith, fantastic year. I would say the first half of the year was better than the second half, but he's coming off a pretty good game against Houston. Danny Trevathan, a guy. What do you think about them?
Yeah. So I think Roquan Smith is overrated at this point in the season. He's very athletic in coverage. We know speed and mobility has always been his strong suit, and no overwhelming complaints there. I mean, I don't know that there are any linebackers that are truly good in coverage, or if there are, there's only 2 or 3. And I wouldn't say that he is like a lockdown coverage linebacker. He's just fast, so he can chase down and tackle people, but he is vulnerable. If a wide receiver is going on a deep crossing route and he's kind of in a middle zone, if he has to try to trail that and cover downfield, it's not going to go well for the Bears. He's not as good in coverage as I think his reputation precedes, and he's been awful in run defense for the majority of the season. He randomly against the Titans and Derrick Henry, he put on like the best game I've seen.
That was wild. Oh my, like 10 stops.
Yeah, he just seemed to be able to fill every gap. And part of it was, and I think we talked about this last time, that there's not that much of a threat of Derrick Henry cutting back, because that was the game before they faced Dalvin Cook, whereas Dalvin Cook a little bit more of a shifty cutback runner. And so Roquan Smith will take himself out of gaps. He'll overrun plays, and he'll try and make the play when he should just kind of stick in his gap and fill so somebody else can make the play. And that's been an issue all season long, continues to be an issue, and not something he gets enough criticism for in Chicago, because he's a fast, exciting middle linebacker who gets a lot of tackles. So you're automatically in the echelon there if you don't mess up really obviously.
So he's Brian Urlacher.
Yeah, well, he's not. Brian Urlacher was better in coverage and better in run defense.
I'm just talking about fast, overrated linebackers that get a ton of tackles. That's all I'm talking about.
I mean, he definitely gets the gloss overing for sure.
And Danny Trevathan?
He's an interesting situation, because like he started off the season looking like the NFL had passed him by, that he was just too old and too banged up for most of the year, and that he was just slow and couldn't keep up with anybody. And then like halfway through the season, he kind of found this fountain of youth and could seemingly run around and make all those tackles and step up and run defense. And now we're kind of back to not slow and out of the league, but kind of the same things as Roquan, where neither one is filling gaps particularly well. They both kind of prefer to run around blocks as opposed to taking them on, and so they'll give up sort of free yards in that regard. And he's never been the fastest in terms of keeping up in coverage at this point, and it's been a vulnerability of this Bears defense over the middle of the field. Tight ends, slot receivers have eaten them alive.
This is like fascinating, right? Because the Bears are fairly well known for being pretty good against the run. And the first discussion we've had about run defense, you're like, yeah, these guys are trash, awful, terrible at run defense. So I looked it up. Rush EPA, according to RVs Don't Matter, 9th in the NFL in rush defense EPA, unless I'm looking at this chart backwards because it's negative, and I don't know if that's like a good thing.
Well, Well, let me say this: the linebackers, the inside linebackers, are both bad in run defense.
Rush success rate second.
Defensive line has been phenomenal. Safeties, defensive backs have been phenomenal. Edge rushers, phenomenal. Everybody is really good except for the two linebackers. And so if you can keep them from getting to that second level, the running back's not going to go anywhere. But if the Bears are losing in terms of box numbers and everyone's there to be accounted for, I don't trust Roquan Smith and Danny Trevathan to make the above and beyond play. If you funnel the running back right to them, they'll make the tackle. But if they have to make the right read and get to the running back in a way that isn't completely obvious and in front of them, it can be a challenge. And they have given up some pretty big rushing performances along the way, but then we're randomly like really good against Derrick Henry and not
They're
too
pretty
bad
good against Dalvin. Yeah,
against Dalvin Cook. That was the other one. And, they're playing the Lions twice doesn't, certainly helps the stats. And the Giants were without Saquon Barkley. I mean, they've played some poor rushing teams along the way, but
well, let's not knock Wayne Gallman. I mean, he's saving some fantasy teams out there.
He was not in week 2, that's for sure. So the Bears are going to give up some rushing yards, but for me, it's
Dalvin Cook's longest game was 14 yards, and he averaged 3.2 a carry. Man, I don't know.
It's been up and down. I will give you that. They've had some really good ones and they've had some really bad ones, and it's been a little bit hard to tell where this defense lands. But the last couple of weeks have been better in run defense than they were for quite a bit of that stretch of the losing streak.
As I'm gonna change the filters in RBs don't matter and test this out. See if we've got better rush EPA numbers.
I mean, in terms of raw numbers, I mean, they're giving up 4 yards.
You're wrong. Nope, you're wrong.
Yeah. I mean, it's like them being bad in run defense doesn't mean guys are always blowing by them. I just see them when the Bears give up a big running play, it's because they are out of position, and that it happens 3 or 4 or 5 times a game, which is a lot more than you want from your inside linebackers. But it doesn't mean, as a whole, the defense can't collectively stop the run pretty well.
Oh, this is fine. I just went to the PFF grades, and DeAndre Houston-Carson's ranked second in PFF grades.
I believe he's their highest graded player this season on defense. Oh, no, Max just barely.
Khalil Mack, yeah. I think it's just the game that he just had that pushed him back up. So,
yeah. Well, 57 snaps, 4 in run defense, 53 in coverage tells you exactly how he's used.
That's so great. All right. Let's talk about these edge defenders. So, Khalil Mack, you expect him to play. He's been on the injury report for like a couple of weeks now as a DNP for most of the days of practice. So I should not take too much.
Different. It's okay. Shoulder, knee, back. It's different. It moves around.
Oh, so it's not like the Tom Brady shoulder probable thing for like 8 years in New England. It just has a different problem.
Yeah, it's and we haven't. Max, one of those players, doesn't really talk about it much. But as I pull up injury reports here, we've seen ankle, back, shoulder, knee. Yeah. So mainly those 4 kind of all around.
Right, dude? That's like all the joints. Every joint.
He's kind of had that every year in Chicago. He's one of those guys that is always hurt but never hurt at the same time.
So right now he's top in the NFL in PFF grade, just ahead of the guy who's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year, TJ Watt. And he's got 54 pressures, which ranks looks like 5th. And a fair amount of sacks. He's participated in 8 sacks, which is not bad. So what is it about his game that seems injury-proof? And so he's primarily lining up over right tackles, right? But he switches around a lot.
Correct.
Yeah. So what is he doing that's so effective this year? Is it any different than what he's done last year? What do his physical skill sets provide? What do his technical skill sets provide? What makes Khalil Mack so good and evidently injury-proof?
What's so interesting about this season for Khalil Mack is that there's a perception that he's not having a very good year. That this has been...
Well, he started with pressures without sacks, right? Like that's part of the perception, right?
Yes and no, because like he over the last 5 weeks, 4 games with a bye week in there, he's had 1 sack. I mean, the majority of his sacks came in the first 8 games, but I guess there was, for some reason, and I don't think I participated in this perception, but like the Chicago...
I'm not at fault.
Well, of course, I'm a genius who's never gotten anything wrong. But, talk radio in Chicago is like, where's Khalil Mack? It's not like he's been completely missing in action, but just that the difference is that he hasn't had the big splash plays. You know, his first season, his first game, he had a pick six or a fumble touchdown on Aaron Rodgers. And like, he's sort of come to expect to have like these game changing plays that it's the one play they need him to step up and make a play. He does it. And there haven't really been those as much. I mean, he's had a couple forced fumbles. He did have an interception and a pass breakup, but like, it hasn't felt quite as game changing because teams put so much attention on him. But in terms of actually answering the question that you asked me there, he wins in so many ways. And I think a big part that he doesn't get enough credit for is the run defense. But in terms of pass rushing, he can win anywhere. And I mean, the variety of pass rushing moves, swims, rips, hump moves, dips. I mean, anything that's in the pass rushing toolbox, he can pretty much do. And he's really good at studying his opponent and knowing which pass rush moves are going to work against that opponent. And then on top of that, you've seen Chuck Pagano really go to a stunt heavy defense for the majority of the season, even more so than we saw last year. He's always kind of looping inside, trying to get one-on-ones against guards. And then on third downs, he could pretty much line up anywhere 0 to 9 technique, sometimes standing up, sometimes with hand in the dirt, and you're not exactly sure where he's going to line up on those plays. So he's been able to just win his one-on-one pass rushes when he gets them, which is pretty rare that he doesn't have 2 or 3 guys on him, which leads to some of that perception of like, well, he's not making as many big plays because he's got 14 guys all trying to block him. But run defense, same thing, sets a firm edge every single time, can knife through and make the play in the backfield if the running back tries to test him. But for the most part, directs runs back inside and away from him, which he doesn't get credit for in terms of a tackle on the stat sheet. But I do like that the PFF grades seem to account for that a bit more than most other places would. So it's just a certain level of consistency week in and week out. He gets the pressures, he gets some sacks, he's really good in run defense. And just because he hasn't had the big explosive plays, you feel like, well, maybe he doesn't deserve highest paid defensive player in the NFL type money, although I certainly don't have any issues with it.
I've got a small theory about Chuck Pagano. It's not very well developed, but here it is. I think he gets bored really easily as like a defensive coordinator. And I think he like just does. And he's a good defensive coordinator. Don't get me wrong. Like it's not like, Greg Williams where you get the one good year and then you get like 3 years of mediocrity before you have to fire him. Although I guess now his timeline's always been shortened to 2. But I feel like Chuck Pagano gets bored. And so like, before arriving in Chicago, he's known as a blitz heavy guy. In Chicago, he's not blitzing nearly as often as he did in other places. But you mentioned that he's stunting and twisting the line a lot, which is true, way more than a lot of other defensive coordinators. And sometimes if you blitz a lot, it's designed to create those one-on-one matchups you're talking about. Stunting and twisting doesn't give you that, but it gives you better rushing angles sometimes. So there's always reasons to do these things, but it always feels like he just kind of wants to be interesting. Is that wrong? I feel like he just does stuff.
So to be honest with you, there was I don't know, movement is the strong word, but like 2 or 3 weeks ago, Bears fans were ready to fire Chuck Pagano after they gave up huge points to the Packers and Lions. They blew a fourth quarter lead in Detroit fashion, just reversed back on them. And it was like, fire Chuck Pagano. He isn't adjusting for this defense. And to some extent, I feel like he is boring as a defensive coordinator. I don't know if
really interesting.
I've seen a lack of adjusting. He's just kind of saying, I'm going to trust my guys to go win. I'm not going to do anything fancy with them right now. The stunting is, yes, in terms of pass rushing, but in terms of like blitzing and different looks for defense, he's not really mixing it up all that much. 90% of the time when it's third down, he's going to blitz and he's going to have man coverage behind it. Or if he's not going to blitz, it's just going to be pure man coverage. Third down, man coverage. And we've seen the smarter coaching staffs, like Aaron Rodgers would call out, drive concepts and mesh concepts. You could hear him do it at the line of scrimmage. They'd get in third down. He'd see man coverage. He'd call out the concept. They'd run crossing routes and underneath drags. And it was like easy money. And Pagano just kind of says, well, I'm going to trust my guys one-on-one in man coverage. And I'm going to say my guys are going to beat your guys. And if you can beat my guys, good on you. Good for you. You earned it, champ. Really appreciate
it. You earned it. Yeah, you got us this time.
Yeah, but it's just, and like week after week, we see Buster Screen get beat by slot receivers, and we see the Bears linebackers. They do a lot of these pattern match kind of zone coverages where it'll turn into man-to-man after the snap, depending on which route concepts the offense runs against them. And you just can't have Danny Trevathan in man-to-man coverage against Devontae Adams 4 plays in a row. Or, Buster Skrine can't do it by himself over the middle of the field if there's not, a safety there to help him, or not passing stuff off among his linebackers. Like, he's still saying, well, I still trust Buster Skrine more often than not. And how many times does he have to get beat before you ultimately change something? And so I have some concerns that, like, if it's Duke Shelley and Kindle Vildor in those roles this week, is he going to trust Duke Shelley and Kindle Vildor against Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson? I'd like to see, some changes schematically in coverage to say, you know what, we're going to pass off these zone coverages rather than trail them in man-to-man. And we just haven't seen a consistency and a proficiency for doing that over the course of the season. So that's where I have some concerns about him. There've been occasional adjustments in run defense. They went to the 6-1 against the Rams. That has always worked so well. They'll do little things like that, but I still have some concerns overall about how tuned in Pagano is, whereas it feels almost more lazy. Like, it's like, well, we're going to do what we're going to do, and it's going to work or it's not going to work, and we're going to find out.
That was an impressive Midwest accent you put on it right there.
He didn't even have a Midwest accent. I don't know why I even went there. It's just
yeah, it's like I Chuck Pagano from the Midwest. So this is
been a quote machine this season when he does get the chance. Just today, I know we're probably still going to get to the defensive lineman, but he was talking about Bilal Nichols, and I pulled up the quote here. He said, "Not real flashy, not real sexy, not this, that, and the other." I mean, he might tell you he's sexy. I don't know. A significant other might tell you that. I thought his mom would. A couple of his teammates might tell him that. Brent Urban might say that.
He just goes on, huh?
Yeah, it kind of feels like old man yells at cloud, kind of rambling just about stuff that's going on. He compared Roquan Smith to aging like a fine wine, like a cabernet. I don't even know.
A cabaret is sexy dancing. So
he called him like a nice cab. So he
cabs have. All right,
doing what he wants to do now.
Okay. Glad we got that out of the way. So quick note. So Kirk Cousins against the blitz this year has been explosive, not necessarily consistent. His completion rate drops from 71% to 59%, but and his yards per attempt also drops as well, 8.5 to 7.6. But the yards per completion increases pretty substantially, and his passer rating jumps about 15 points, mostly because somehow he's avoided interceptions against the blitz, which I think tells us that he sees man coverage on blitzes more than anything else, honestly. But his touchdown rate nearly doubles under the blitz as well. So I think you don't necessarily see consistent play versus the blitz with Cousins, but you do see explosive. So if they do decide to go man coverage and it is Duke Shelley and Kindle Vildor, I think you're probably going to see some deep shots. And the Vikings have shown that they're willing to take those one-step deep drops where you don't know if the receivers beat the DB by the time you let go of the ball, but the intention is that you expect them to. I would not be shocked if that's in the blitz plan, especially with injured defensive backs. Also of note, the blitz rate for the Chicago Bears is actually below the Vikings, who have a below-average blitz rate. The Vikings have a blitz rate about 24%, the Bears 22%. So people were complaining about Vic Fangio not blitzing enough. Well, here you go. All right.
That's all.
Yeah.
Period.
All right, defensive line. Let's talk about big sexy or unsexy Bilal Nichols. Let's talk about Brent Urban. Let's talk about Mario Edwards, who's doing pretty well this year, I think. And some guy named Akeem Hicks. I don't know. Do you know about him?
He plays every once in a while off the bench, I think. Yeah, the Mario Edwards situation, I don't know if you've heard about the arrest and the domestic violence allegations, but it's kind of a...
I've not. Wow, that sounds a lot worse now that I'm like, hey, what about this guy? He sounds great.
He's been playing very well. And so just earlier this week, I believe TMZ was the one that uncovered the arrest records and court documents because he was arrested in October. He had brought a female who I believe was in a relationship with him and who TMZ reported was pregnant, which I don't know that I've seen anybody else verify, but TMZ has said that she was pregnant. Which was a violation of the team's COVID rules to bring any guest into the road hotel room with you. And there was some sort of altercation. He denies any sort of domestic violence, but she claims she was recording video of it and that she received treatment at a hospital for some scratches and damage to her eye. And he also reportedly had scratches on his forehead. So there was some sort of back and forth there. And it's super unclear exactly what happened, but there may be a recording that can sort that out. But regardless, he was never suspended, has not seen any snaps reduced or games missed or taken away over the last 2 months since that happened. It just came out this week. He's still practicing. He's going to play.
So the Bears learned about this 2 months ago. TMZ reported it this week.
Correct.
Okay. Oh, geez. Come on, dudes.
Well, Matt Nagy says, we handled the COVID-19 violation internally and that we're working with the NFL on any potential punishment from the legal standpoint. But of course, legally, you're innocent until you're proven guilty, and there hasn't been any further developments in terms of court hearings or anything like that. So, yeah, not a good look for the team by any means. Kind of.
All right.
I don't think they were like intentionally covering it up. They were just conveniently enjoying that no one knew about it.
Okay, fine, whatever. Let's talk about some play on the field.
Yeah.
So Mario Edwards playing pretty well. Bilal Nichols, I guess, gets the job done according to that description. Brent Urban, big Bilal Nichols fan, sounds like. Akeem Hicks comes off the bench occasionally.
So when Akeem Hicks plays, it is night and day difference for this defense. Like
certainly seems like it.
He's almost more important than Khalil Mack, and you might be able to say he is. I mean, it's hard to. Maybe when Khalil Mack's gone, we would notice it in a little bit more of a visible way. But like for some reason, it's just like for some reason, right, when Akeem Hicks is gone, everybody else plays worse. It's just an energy, a leadership thing. Khalil Mack's kind of the quiet, lead by example guy. Akeem Hicks is more of the loud, in your face, rile everybody up thing. So like in terms of like what the Bears would be missing on a snap to snap basis from the individual player, Khalil Mack is more important. But like over the whole defense, having Akeem Hicks back is absolutely humongous. It just seems like they can win with whoever they put out on the defensive line right now, not named John Jenkins. And Daniel McCullers has been pretty bad too, but they've got 5 guys, or I guess 4 guys.
Is McCullers the Tennessee guy that weighed like 400 pounds?
Pittsburgh weighed 400 pounds. Urban came from Tennessee, but he did not weigh 400 pounds. But McCullers, the University of Tennessee. Yeah, sorry. I think you meant the Titans. Yes, McCullers.
No, University of Tennessee, yes.
The Volunteers nose tackle, who is listed right now at 6'7", 352, but he's close. He's pushing 4, I'm sure.
Okay, yeah.
But he's pretty darn bad. A friend of the show, Owen Reese, who covers the Packers and among others, texted me at one point. He's like, "Is Daniel McCullers the worst defensive lineman in the NFL?" And I said, "I think so." He's not good. John Jenkins has been pretty mediocre, but Mario Edwards getting after the quarterback consistently in that rotation. Brent Urban, really good in run defense, getting some pass rush in there as well. And then Bilal Nichols kind of was hitting this like sophomore, I guess this is his sophomore season wall early on, wasn't playing as great, or this is his 3rd season, excuse me, but he's been coming on the last like 2 or 3 games. He's been getting to the quarterback and seems to have kind of turned a corner and figured something out about how to properly assess opponents and also mix up his pass rushing moves in a way that he doesn't become too predictable. So it's been a great group up front, really great coaching by their defensive line coach, who deserves to be a defensive coordinator some point in the very near future. Doesn't seem to matter who they have on the field there. They're getting some consistency from those guys, which is more than you can say about edge rushers not named Khalil Mack.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We didn't even talk about the other edge rushers. So you've got Robert Quinn, who I guess is a run defender now, Barkevious Mingo, who is in the league, and James Vaughters, who, according to Stephen A. Smith, is just one of those guys that is just going to punish you.
Yeah, he's the guy you can read off of a list of names for sure. Yeah, Robert Quinn has been the most disappointing free agent signing of this offseason for the Bears. They have at least one every year, and he's this year's candidate.
He's this year's guy. You got to like sign a couple so you can like offer one up as the sacrifice. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they thought between him and Jimmy Graham, one of them's got to work, right? I mean, I guess. And Graham has caught touchdowns. I don't know. We'll get to that. But no, Quinn, to his credit, he's had some pressures. He can't finish when he does get to the quarterback, and he hasn't been able to consistently win even just the one-on-one pass rushes on the edge as much as you'd like to see. Maybe asking him to drop back in coverage occasionally is also a bad idea. They've only had to do it like once or twice a game at most, so he's pretty much still getting after the quarterback. He's pretty good in run defense, all things considered. That wasn't what he was brought in for, but has done a decent job there. It's just generally a disappointment. Barkevius Mingo is kind of their go-to coverage edge rusher. I mean, he rushed the passer plenty, and I mean, it's still his primary role. But if they're going to drop one guy in coverage, it's usually going to be Barkevius Mingo, and he's just like exceedingly average in every way. He's not a big sack producer. He's not great in any area, but not awful in any area. He just fills a space and occupies a block, I guess. And then Vaughters and their rookie Travis Gibson from Tulsa, both flashed occasionally, but not anything to write home about. Not anybody you want to have to consistently rely on in either spot in the lineup. So they still need one of these other edge rushers to do something to help Khalil Mack. But for now, Mack is the only one you have to worry about, along with then the interior defensive lineman. But the other edge spot, leave him one-on-one with your tackle, and you'll feel pretty good about it.
Even if it's a Vikings tackle?
Even if it's a Vikings. I know it's a different kind of a bar, but I think so. You can feel pretty comfortable there.
All right, so Leonard Floyd signed a 1-year, $10 million deal. Robert Quinn signed a several-year, $14 million deal. What is it? 3-year deal? 4-year deal? 5-year deal. Wow.
But only like the first 3 years are guaranteed, so they're only locked in through 2022. Don't worry.
All right. So 3 years fully guaranteed, $30 million. And Leonard Floyd, I guess 10 million fully guaranteed, but only 1 year. Floyd has a slightly better PFF grade and is 2 years younger. Who would you rather have?
Boy, when they made the decision, I was completely in favor of it. I mean, hindsight makes you question it a little bit. I would rather have Floyd on a 1-year deal than I would Quinn on the 5-year deal. But but overall, I think Leonard Floyd's success this season, I mean, I think he has like 8 sacks, and so Bears fans are always ready to say, "Oh, well, the Bears made the wrong decision."
I watched those sacks. They're
Leonard Floyd sacks. I mean, that's what it was like in Chicago. I mean, he had 7 sacks his first 2 seasons.
They're Vic Beasley sacks, yeah.
Yeah, it's I loop inside and I'm unblocked, or I just quarterback runs into my arm. They're not impressive pass rush win sacks. So it's the same Leonard Floyd as he's always been, and I would take him on a 1-year, $10 million deal. I would not want him on a 5-year extended contract, much like I would probably take Robert Quinn on a 1-year deal more so than the 5. So, obviously with hindsight this season, I would rather have Leonard Floyd based on what we've seen so far, but I don't know that the thought process behind the decision that they made, I don't think was overly flawed.
All right. That makes sense. All right. Let's talk about the offense. Boy. So
period.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, we could start by talking about Mitch Trubisky, who put up numbers, as a matter of speaking.
Technically.
You will be surprised to learn that he does not lead the NFL in Week 14 in yak percentage.
Really?
Yeah, I knew you'd be surprised. So first of all, passer rating 126.7, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 267 yards, 8.09 yards per attempt, 9.91 adjusted yards per attempt. All really great numbers, but important piece of context, he did not throw the ball downfield at all. He was second to last in average depth of target for Week 14. And let's see, what did I put the yak percentage?
I think it was 77.
I think it's 71.9 or something like that. I guess it depends on kind of whose yak you're charting, right? Because every organization might have it different. But let's see. Yeah, here it is. 71.2. So who do you think had a higher percentage of their yards come via yak?
Boy, I know that the quarterback that had fewer average depth of target yards than him last week was Brandon Allen from the Bengals, but I don't think he would have had that many more yak yards. I also know Patrick Mahomes notoriously gets a lot of yak yards, but he had some deeper shots last week.
These are both really good guesses. I'll explain why they're good guesses, but they're not. Neither of them are the answer.
Yeah, that was my way of not guessing either of those names, but still floating them out there in case I was right about one of them. That was my guess. Again, in a similar vein, I would be leaning Alex Smith, but I don't think he really had that great of a performance either. Jared Goff? Question mark.
Nope. Jared Goff is not even in the top 5. He's not even in the top 15. Wow.
Wow. Big
You
week
go,
for
Goff.
him.
Yeah, big week for him. Yeah, so Patrick Mahomes led all quarterbacks in YAC this week, but not in YAC percentage. He actually he just had so many yards that he's not even in the top half. And Brandon Allen was immediately behind Mitchell Trubisky in YAC percentage at 66.8%. The person ahead of him, Jalen Hurts, 71.9%, who I believe had a PFF passer grade of 40 or something crazy like that. Yeah. So
I should have known because they schemed him up for rookies, just take the easy. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. They're like, is the 5-yard pass there? No, you should run.
Yeah, the Mitch Trubisky offense. Great.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's exactly what it was. He did have a couple of great throws. They were all for negative yardage until the yak kicked in, but a couple of like legitimately interesting throws. Was able to avoid some picks. Probably should have thrown a pick in the end zone. Wasn't to Jimmy Graham. Who was it to? I forget. It was one of the 3 touchdowns. It was over the middle of the slant on the RPO.
Allen Robinson.
Yeah. That probably should have been a pick, but whatever. He had a couple of like really like, I can't believe you made those throws, but also the throws were for negative yardage. How much credit do I want to give you? Sort of thing. So, weird.
Of like jump balls to Allen Robinson. One was 18 yards in the air. It was a back shoulder throw. And then there was another like sort of like end zone fade one that Robinson probably should have caught, but it was good coverage. There were a couple of like in the intermediate sideline.
And he kept throwing the fade, right? Because the Graham touchdown was a fade as well.
He can throw the fade if it's under 25 yards ish. I mean, if
it was a pretty good throw to Graham, I'm going to say that.
Yeah, but I mean, you just put it up there, and Graham is twice the size.
That's part of it. He was up against what was it, Eric Murray, former Gopher?
That sounds right. I know they were starting nobodies at cornerback. I mean, it was Hargraves, Murray, and somebody else.
Yeah, Murray's a safety too. Like, I don't know what we're doing here.
That's why the Mitch Trubisky stuff, I mean, among other reasons, feels artificial in terms of the defenses that he's done it against.
So he's not back?
You ask Bears fans, and I think they're ready to franchise tag him and run it back next year and give him maybe even just another contract in general because Matt Nagy figured it out.
Just another contract. I mean, okay, so from a play design perspective, there were some interesting things they did. A lot of use of bunch really effectively to create isolations for either Robinson or Graham, knowing that they were going to win those one-on-ones when they had Robinson or Graham. Creating some interesting screen opportunities, which again are the only opportunities that you're going to get. Really smart use of RPO. Is it Bill Lazor or Matt Nagy?
That's a good question. I mean, it's definitely both, but I give Matt Nagy still more of the credit. So, like, I think Lazor's calling the plays on game day, but in terms of like the week-long game plan, it's a heavy Matt Nagy thing. And this is what Matt Nagy's offense was supposed to look like from the beginning and generally what he's been trying to do. And I think the difference is you're seeing much better offensive line play. You're seeing a better running game. You're seeing Mitch Trubisky. I think he did take something away from being benched, and it didn't change who he is as a quarterback on the field. But like one of the things Bill Lazor said this week is that like now Mitch is a guy who like during meetings during the week and even on game day, he speaks up a little bit more. And if there's a play that he doesn't like or just isn't as comfortable with, or a play that he does like, he's more comfortable in challenging his coaches. And I think he watched Nick Foles do that for 6 weeks, and Foles be not afraid to tell Nagy a play sucked. And Mitch is like, hey, wait, we can do that? Like, we can talk back to these people?
Sorry, wait a second.
Yeah, so I think Mitch deserves some credit in that regard. I mean, again, I don't think he's a different quarterback. He's still rolling out and throwing to the farthest underneath defender on all the checkdowns. And also, the Texans' defense was a particular matchup where, for some reason, they insisted on staying in a lot of 2 deep shells and taking away the deep shots, even though I generally, I think, would want to encourage Mitch to take more of those deep shots if I'm a defensive coordinator. But So I think it was a combination of that. It was like the Texans were a good matchup for it. The Bears have been playing better around Trubisky, and maybe they have a better sense now of sticking with the running game a little bit more and being able to implement more play action and move the pocket a little bit more, and just kind of better understanding what will work for Mitch Trubisky and how you can try and make it work for Trubisky given his limitations.
Let's play another Trubisky-related statistics game.
Uh-oh.
So, of all the quarterbacks that started the year for the franchise, Mitch Trubisky ranks dead last in differential between big time throw percentage and turnover worthy play percentage based off of the data I was able to extract as if blood from a stone from PFF. I really wish that data was a little bit more public. So you notice that there was a qualifier of the quarterbacks that started the year for the franchise, which means there are quarterbacks, or at least one quarterback, and it turns out there's only one quarterback, who has a worse differential between big-time throw and turnover-worthy plays. Who is it?
My immediate guess was Nick Foles.
No, but that would be funny. Also, I actually would not actually have that data, so it might still be Nick Foles. They're starting this week. That's the other clue.
Oh, I was going to guess Carson Wentz then, but
that would have been amazing. And who knows? Maybe it's true.
Yeah, quarterback starting this week. I'm like glancing at the list of teams on Pro Football Reference right now to think of who would be like the sort of quarterback that we wouldn't maybe he didn't start every week. I don't think it's Tua Tagovailoa, and that's the other.
It is not, although his differential is negative, which I think a lot of draft Twitter would not like to hear.
And like Trace McSorley's not starting, and Robert Quinn's not starting. Robert Griffin III not starting for Baltimore.
That's correct.
I'm for a loss.
It's you already named him, Brandon Allen.
Oh man,
whose differential is twice as bad, by the way.
Wow.
It's so Trubisky's big time throw percentage is 2.64. The turnover worthy play percentage is 5.29. And so that's a negative 2.65 difference. Brandon Allen, negative 5.88.
Yikes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where you're at. But he is no, he's still actually worse than Taysom Hill. Okay, cool. They're close though. But yeah, so this leads to another question. So Trubisky's only thrown 5 picks, right? But these numbers imply that he should be throwing 11. Does that match with based on like what you've watched? Have there been like a lot of dropped picks?
There were early in the season over those first few games, which led to his benching. As I certainly not last week. We've seen a couple sprinkled here and there though, but it doesn't feel like he's getting away with a lot of really bad decisions. I mean, it's been he'll get the issue seems to be a little bit more. Well, I was going to say last week the issue was a little bit more accuracy, but then like I was thinking back to like the Packers game when things were really bad, and he got away with a couple of there that he really shouldn't have. So it's hard to tell what exactly Trubisky is at this point because we've seen him play pretty well the last 2 weeks against 2 of the NFL's worst defenses. But assuming it's the same Trubisky, I think against a reasonable defense like the Vikings, he may put a couple of balls in harm's way, but it's not going to be like overwhelmingly like bad throw after bad throw after bad throw.
Right, and I don't think PFF counted the throw in the end zone where the linebacker had his shoulders turned the wrong way as a turnover worthy play. So I think the defender has to get their hands on it.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know. This game is fun. This one isn't even about the Bears. So Ryan Tannehill leads the league in differential between thrown picks and estimated thrown picks based off of turnover worthy plays. Which 2 quarterbacks are tied for second? You can only name one of them, and I'll count that as a win.
So you said thrown picks versus turnover worthy throws, right? So
yeah, generally, so essentially the luckiest in terms of the amount of actual interceptions they've thrown.
Yeah, so I know Carson Wentz leads the league in turnover worthy throws, and he only has and he leads leading interceptions too. And so I know
it won't work there. Yeah, but that is interesting.
So he's not one of the 2, despite
he's not one of the 2. He's actually tied for 3rd, which is hilarious.
I'm sure Josh Allen is 1.
Yeah, okay, you nailed it. We'll count that as a win. Josh Allen has 8 picks he quote unquote should have thrown. Patrick Mahomes is the other one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Mahomes one is interesting, but Sam Monson has been like beating that one into the ground. So I thought you might have been able to get it because he won't stop talking about that on Twitter.
The reason I got it is I could remember a PFF tweet that listed who were the league leaders in turnover worthy plays, and I remember it was Wentz and Allen, and I couldn't remember who the rest were. So those were my 2 guesses.
Right. Yeah, Wentz has 7 more picks that he should have thrown. Which, knowing that he leads the league in picks, I mean that's quite the feat. Okay, back to the Bears. Okay, yeah, cool. So Dave Montgomery had a pretty good game. A lot of it built off of one big run, but he's like fourth in the league in like forced missed tackles. I don't know if we talked about this last time, but his like yards per carry and expected points are just not very good. But his missed tackle rate, his elusiveness rating in PFF, very good. Is he good, or is he racking up missed tackles and also not good? Because I can see running backs not being very good and still generating a bunch of missed tackles.
So he's good. I don't know that he's great. That's what I think we're still trying to determine here. The sample size, even though he's been starting now for 2 seasons, the sample size is still small because for a significant stretch this season, the Bears' offensive line was so bad. It didn't feel like any running back could have much success back there. And then also that the Bears just don't run the ball even when they have a lead. Like, I think they're 31st in rushing attempts this season.
That's so very un-Bears. That's interesting.
Well, Matt Nagy just hates running the ball. I mean, it's just he said after the bye week, we really need to get back to establishing the run, and they came back against Green Bay and ran the ball like 10 times. Like, it was just he says David Montgomery had 11 carries in that game, and this first carry was for 57 yards, and then they just stopped running the ball. And they say over and over again, yeah, we got to run the ball, we want to run the ball, and then they just choose not to, and it's been really weird and saying different things and doing the opposite. But so like the missed tackles, I think, are very well deserved, but a lot of them are happening at or behind the line of scrimmage. So he'll make 2 guys miss and get 3 yards on the play because it feels like he never has much of a chance to really break free and get the yards, because so often it was backup interior linemen, backup edge rushers. Over the last 2 games, they finally found the offensive line combination that works and is run blocking well for them. And I think that's led to those big runs that he's broken off. But like, even last week, he has the 80-yard touchdown run on the first play, and I don't think he carried the ball at all in the third quarter, despite the Bears being up by like 3 touchdowns.
Quite a bit, yeah.
It's just weird, and Matt Nagy always is like, yeah, we got to be better about that, and then just doesn't.
He even gave someone else the ability to call plays, and they still won't run the ball.
Yeah, they gave it to Cordell Patterson like 4 times in the third quarter, and just ignored David Montgomery. I don't have answers. Like, no one has answers.
Is Cordell Patterson a good running back?
No, I mean he's the guy we saw with the Patriots. I mean he can pick up some yards here and there. He's fast and he'll run hard, but he's not a running back.
Okay, I'm glad that we're on the same team here, because I have long said that he's not a good running back.
I still think New England had the best plan, where it's like you change up his role every few weeks so the defense can't quite prepare for him exactly how you're going to use him, but you still keep it simple enough that he can understand it and not put too much on his plate. So like that year he went from like week 1 and 2, he was a screen wide receiver only. And then like weeks 4 through 8, he was a running back. And then weeks like 8 through 12, they were taking deep shots with him all of a sudden. Like, it was always something different. And defenses, just when they start to figure him out and what his role is, they switch it up and do something else with him. And that's, to me, the ideal role. And the Bears are just saying outside zone running back over and over and over again. That's all it's going to be.
All right. Yeah. But the best kick returner in Bears history. That's true.
Best kick returner, bar none.
Yeah. You needed to be real specific. All right. Let's talk about these tight ends real quick. So Jimmy Graham, red zone machine, legitimately good tight end, gimmick guy, lucky. What's going on?
Red zone machine, gimmick guy, and lucky. I think
all of them.
Well, I don't know. Maybe not so gimmicky, but red zone machine and lucky for sure. Because that's kind of what he was in Green Bay, and it feels very similar. Like,
but he was a red zone maven in Seattle too.
Yeah, I mean, when he, like I said, they like to line him 1-on-1 against a cornerback and throw him a jump ball, and that's been almost all of his touchdowns this season. And I mean, it's worked for 6 of them, I think, so far. But you're talking 8.5 yards per catch and 350 total yards on the season. That's a little bit more true to what he has been. I mean, if he is standing wide open in the field, he will catch it. But he's not going to make a ton of plays after the catch. He's still a lazy route runner. He's still a lazy run blocker. He's still a lazy pass protector. Every once in a while, he'll choose to give effort on those plays, and it's a nice surprise. But otherwise, it's a 34-year-old guy kind of collecting checks and just, scramble drill pretty well, and he'll just sit in an open spot in his zone and catch it. But he has been pretty much relegated to the number 2 tight end role over the last 3 or 4 weeks. They have forced Cole Kmet into that even if it's a square peg in a round hole, they have jammed it in there as much as they possibly can. So he is the number one tight end now. He's caught some passes over the last few weeks, and he runs hard, but he's not, he's not Travis Kelce or Rob Gronkowski or anything like that right now. I mean,
but he's not Adam Shaheen either.
You're right. I think usage has something to do with that. I mean, he's not Adam Shaheen, yes, but I haven't been overly impressed by what Cole Kmet has done, despite having some decent catches and yards over the last couple of games. He's had a couple plays where he'll drag defenders for an extra 3 or 4 yards, and that's really nice to see. But he's not explosive. He doesn't seem like he's a great route runner by any means at the position. He's an all right blocker too. He feels like very average at this point, which I guess for a rookie tight end is fine. But I think, you see 5 catches for 37 against Detroit and 4 for 41 against Houston. A lot of that was just catching it at the 1 yard line and having no one near him for 9 or 10 yards and just being able to run kind of freely until he gets brought down. So it's been more scheme than his individual effort, I guess, is the greater point there. But he has been their go-to guy over Graham as of late.
So who'd you take one-on-one in the red zone? Jimmy Graham or Harrison Smith covering him?
The only thing Jimmy Graham can do in the red zone is stand there and box out. I don't, he's not going to make you miss on a route and be open all of a sudden. And so I don't know that I've seen enough of Harrison Smith in those situations where they're just pressed up against each other and winner has to just go up and catch it. But I find myself still leaning Harrison Smith just because I think he's had a lot of experience doing it. And I trust him more so than some of the defensive backs that Graham has been able to kind of punk this season. So I think it's kind of thing if you do it 10 times, I think Graham might win 4 of them. So it's pretty close.
That's close,
but
yeah.
I think Harrison Smith can keep up with him if the spacing, if they're literally just lined up one-on-one and it's man coverage and they're just, everyone knows where the ball is going to go and what happens. But sometimes they'll kind of sneak Graham in here and there and make it a little bit less obvious for the jump ball. And then maybe Graham has a little bit of advantage from the element of surprise or misdirection or whatever it might be.
Yeah, Harrison Smith is not a remarkable man coverage defender, but if it's Jimmy Graham, he's not too worried about route running or quickness getting him, which is kind of where Harrison Smith falls behind in man coverage. So I think the boxing out stuff, he probably has an advantage. I think I'm with you on this one. And then Cole Kmet,
that's all it is.
Yeah, exactly. And then Cole Kmet, I don't know. So if you put him up against other rookie tight ends from previous years, would you say that he just falls average compared to rookie tight ends? Or do you think that because tight end is a position that takes a little bit longer to acclimate, that compared to rookie tight ends, he's actually doing all right?
He's doing all right. I mean, in the sense that he's done a good job of picking up the offense and knowing where he's supposed to go. But I guess I still want to see him be a little bit more of a difference maker, and that's not fair for a rookie tight end. I understand, so that's why I kind of feel like he's doing all right for a rookie tight end. But
harsh.
It just feels like he's a poor man's Kyle Rudolph, and that's all he's ever going to be, and that's fine.
Current Kyle Rudolph or career Kyle Rudolph? Poor man's.
I think he's aspiring to be a career Kyle Rudolph, but maybe currently he is and I know it sounds lazy because they're Notre Dame tight ends and they're just both big, slow white guys, but that kind of, I mean, that's the comp for him coming out. I mean, he's big, he'll catch it. He's a little bit hard to bring down, but he's not going to blow by anybody, and he's not going to make you miss in terms of being shifty or anything like that. He's just going to be a little bit hard to tackle, and he's going to get open. He's going to be a reliable kind of safety blanket, but not often is that going to go for 100 yards in a game.
Would you take rookie Hayden Hurst or rookie Cole Kmet?
For one season, I probably would lean somebody like rookie Hayden Hurst, but over the course of, because I think Hurst is a guy that has a little bit more explosiveness and can move a little bit better than I've seen from Cole Kmet thus far, just because he is smaller. But I think there's going to be a level of consistency that I like from Kmet in terms of always being that big body guy who just is going to catch it and is going to rumble and tumble forward. And I still like his outlook there compared to an old man like Hayden Hurst, who's, I know he's only 3 years in the league, but he just is old coming out of the draft.
Yeah.
Career-wise, I'll still take what we've seen from Cole Kmet, but I think Hurst is a guy that you put him in this Bears scheme specifically in this offense, I think he could do a little bit more damage than what we've seen from Cole Kmet thus far.
All right. Let's talk about this receiving core. Really good receiving core. Allen Robinson, obviously. Darnell Mooney is playing really well. I don't know if I want to count Cordell Patterson. Anthony Miller has moments, both good and bad, I think is the best way to describe him.
Yes.
And Riley Ridley is a person that should be on the field, but is not. What's that?
I said that's debatable.
I mean just in terms of expectations, not in terms of.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of expectations, absolutely.
Yeah. So this seems like a very top-heavy receiver unit, a receiver core that can't sustain any injuries, which is very much like the Vikings. If you put this receiving core up against the Vikings, do you take the Vikings?
Yes.
Yeah.
Almost.
How good is Darnell Mooney?
It's a little bit hard to tell. He's good. It's just hard to tell how good because this Bears offense hasn't been able to utilize him in the way that he might be best. I mean, he was known coming out of Tulane and had a lot of his success there as the field stretching deep threat. I mean, he is a speed guy who can take the top off and create so much room underneath in his wake for other receivers to have space and be open. And that's just not how the Bears offense operates or has been able to operate, in some part because of quarterback, in some part because of offensive line. And so, like he's looked really good. He's exceeded expectations as a 5th round pick. He's showing a more well-rounded game than we thought coming out of Tulane. I think I mentioned it last time on the podcast that when he was in college, when he came to the Bears, he said in college I didn't really have time to watch film on my opponents because I had school and stuff. But now I can know what my cornerbacks are going to do before I start the game, rather than having to figure them out as we go along. So it's been a revelation for him to be able to be a more well-rounded receiver when have more effective breaks on intermediate routes and be able to kind of take those sharper turns as opposed to being more of the vertical, skinny posts and go routes and corner routes. He can do more now. His speed is very real and effective. He's able to make some guys miss after the catch, but again, just throwing him bubble screens doesn't seem to be necessarily maximizing that skill set. And, overneath throws over the middle and stuff. It's works for him, but it has limited his production. So it's still a little bit hard to tell if he can be truly great, but it feels like the Bears are set with him as their number 2 wide receiver for a while.
Okay. And then seeing how the Vikings corners have evidently improved since the last matchup, at least over the course of the last couple of games. Obviously, Allen Robinson is going to be better, right, than Cameron Dantzler or Jeff Gladney or whoever it is they line up. But that skill gap seems to be smaller, especially with Cameron Dantzler. I don't know what the answer is in terms of that matchup against Darnell Mooney. I don't know how much you know about the Vikings corners or whether or not you've seen, improvement from them in the last couple of weeks or what, but how do you evaluate that matchup?
Yeah, I think based on the way Cameron Dantzler handled Mike Evans last week, I do think that's going to be a really fun matchup. I lean Allen Robinson in that regard because he just wins in so many ways, and I think he's a little bit more of a technician than Mike Evans is, but still, that's going to be. And
Mike Evans might still be hurt. I don't trust this year's Mike Evans. Yeah.
And that's I think we're kind of on the same page there. The Mooney stuff again, I think I would, if it's in a vacuum, I'd take Mooney over Gladney or Dantzler in terms of on some of those deeper shows. And again, I haven't watched an extensive amount. Maybe not the way Dantzler has played the last couple of weeks. Although I think Mooney is just faster enough than him that if you give Mooney the chance to kind of pull away a little bit, I don't know that Dantzler can quite keep up with that kind of speed. But I think Gladney would hold up with him pretty well down the field. It's just he's not going to get the chances to. So. If Mooney's working across the middle on a crossing route, I mean, he's gonna win that man-to-man coverage because I think he just has, again, sort of the speed and he knows how to stack cornerbacks even more horizontally in terms of using his body to not box out per se, but shield the ball from being the defensive back being able to reach around him to the front and try and get in front of the ball. I mean, he has some of those sort of veteran savvy understandings of how to run his routes, even when it's not a technique sort of thing in terms of breaks and slowing down and movement in that regard. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of that matchup be exposed in a way that tells us who would win. But I guess I'll put it this way. I think it's pretty darn close. I really think Mooney is a really effective route runner that he's not getting a lot of credit for. And as good as I've seen Gladney and Dantzler play, that one it's another one of those with Graham and Harrison Smith where you throw it 10 times and I think it's a 60-40 kind of split.
Sure. All right, let's talk about the offensive line. I want you to name them for me because I had such a difficult time figuring out who was starting, who was not. I figured Cody Whitehair is going to play, and he played really phenomenally last week. But tell me about who the other four are, just so I don't screw this one up.
Yeah, so impressively, the Our Lads depth chart has stayed on top of it. The rotation or the lineup right now that has been working really well is, Charles Leno at left tackle has been the only guy that's started every single game, I believe, at his spot. He's the only guy that hasn't had to move spots or miss significant time at left tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Cody Whitehair is now playing left guard. Former Notre Dame undrafted free agent Sam Mustipher is playing center. Former
Star Wars guy. Yeah, I know him.
Yeah, and then former Notre Dame undrafted free agent from the same class, college teammate Alex Bars is playing guard. So you got three Notre Damers with Mustipher, Bars, and Cole Kmet. I think that's part of why they want them all in the lineup. And then the former Seahawk Jermaine.
Come on, feel the Illinois. All right.
Yeah, big time. And then former Seahawk Jermaine Ifedi, who the Bears were starting at right guard. They have since bumped him out to right tackle in lieu of Rashad Coward, who has been really bad this season. And Ifedi, well, the right side is very much the weak link. And I was going to say Ifedi has been worse than Alex Bars, but it's a toss-up there. I mean, I think Bars is worse in the run blocking department than he is in pass protection, and I think the opposite is true for Jermaine Ifedi. Overall, I think I still trust Ifedi a little bit more, but either way, I think the left side has been pretty darn solid with Leno, Whitehair, and Mustipher has been sort of the surprise positive for the Bears this season. He may be playing himself into the starting lineup next year and being able to leave Cody Whitehair at guard and only have to address the right guard spot in that regard.
Wait, what happens to the Iowa kid, James whatever?
Oh, yeah, well, James Daniels could pop in at right guard or left guard. You're right. I overlooked him in that discussion, but there's some real possibility there that you leave Whitehair at one of the guard spots and you put James Daniels at the other, and then Mustipher plays center, and you can focus your attention on trying to improve the tackles that have been, I think, the more frustrating part for Bears fans.
Just a solid Midwestern offensive line. All right.
A lot of good old farm boys.
Yeah. All right. So
draw, which is great too. I mean, Matt Nagy does this Robert Quinn impression of, since we're talking about the farm boys kind of thing. He's like Robert Quinn's just happy to wake up in the morning, man. He's just, I woke up from sleep, I'm happy to go. It's hilarious. It's really well done.
All right. Well, so seeing how the Vikings may not have Eric Hendricks, and then obviously they don't have Anthony Barr. They've got Troy Dye. They've got Eric Wilson. They've got, I don't know, I guess Todd Davis.
Not Ryan Connolly, my Wisconsin boy.
He showed up once. You can imagine how that went for him to not show up again. But yeah, I mean, it might be Ryan Connolly. I mean, we did not see the world's best Todd Davis out there last week. So yeah, who knows? But none of them are good at defending the run, even though that's like Todd Davis's only job. And Troy Dye and Eric Wilson are just like safeties, right? But they're the listing designation for them is linebacker. They go into the linebacker meeting rooms. They have linebacker numbers, so I guess they're linebackers, but they're safeties, right? So you mentioned that the Bears' offensive line has been run blocking better as of late. Again, I think a lot of that might just be Cody Whitehair just steamrolling people. God, he's good, isn't he? But and maybe the Houston Texans game is like overweighting my sample of Cody Whitehair. But do you see this as like a matchup where whether or not the Bears choose to run the ball, their run blocking is going to give them a lot more opportunities than last time?
I think so. I think I'm anticipating something similar to what we've seen the last few weeks, where I would kind of guess that David Montgomery might be able to break free for a significant run, not 80-yard touchdown, but like, maybe it's 25, where he just kind of slips through, because he's been so good at, once he gets to the second level, making somebody miss, whether it's a safety or a linebacker, that finally the offensive line is letting him get that far. And when he has a little bit more space to work with, he can take that 10-yard run and make it 15 or 20. So I would expect something like that. And then the Bears are going to get away from it. I mean, they have like one game this season where they consistently ran the ball for 4 quarters. It doesn't matter how big the lead or the deficit is. When it comes to that third quarter in particular, they're going to pass. Doesn't matter if they're winning or losing or whatever it is, it's pass, 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 pass. So I think he's going to get his yards. I don't know that it's going to be a complete 100-yard game, but I think he'll get his 10 to 15 carries for, 60 to 75 yards or whatever it might be. And the Bears feel good about how their running game went, but it still falls a lot on Mitch Trubisky's shoulders, and that has produced mixed results over the years.
How did he get an 80-yard run? He's a 4.63 guy, and maybe that was a slow day. He ran a 4.58 at his pro day, and I guess according to Draft Scout, his hand time was 4.55. But I mean, none of those are like 80-yard run speeds. He's no Miles Sanders. How did he get this 80-yard run?
Some scheme and some formation from the Texans. So, they were single deep. They actually had like 8 guys in the box, but the Bears had a bunch formation to the right, and they brought pre-snap, or they made it a bunch formation, but pre-snap. Anthony Miller moved across the formation, and they snapped it right as he crossed the formation, and it was sort of an RPO screen to the right side of that bunch formation. And so you saw like 4 defenders all ran that way, and so it left basically like the defensive lineman, 2 linebackers, a deep safety, and whatever cornerback was on the left side of the field with Allen Robinson. So Montgomery had a hole big enough to drive a truck through, made the single deep safety miss, and then he's running down the left sideline. Allen Robinson runs down with him and blocks that left cornerback, and everybody else had paid so much attention to the RPO screen on the right side of the field that they were just too far away to catch up.
That's so dumb.
Texans defense, baby.
All right, so watch out for the RPO screens. Well, there was a lot of RPO against the Texans, right?
And that's one of Matt Nagy's defenses for not running the ball as much is that he calls a lot of RPOs and they get passed.
Hey, I'm calling run plays.
Yeah, he said a lot of some of those passing plays had runs tagged on them that we could have run, and they just ended up being passed so he's basically blaming the defense, saying, well, the way the defense played our RPO, we were passing instead of running. And so that makes sense. He's not wrong, but it's still a frustration point for sure.
Well, but why are you calling RPOs when you're up 20 in the fourth quarter, though?
You're going to have to ask Bill Lazor about that. Or even if it's like, why are you handing it off to Cordell Patterson when David Montgomery is running really, really well? It's just, I get wanting to give David Montgomery some breaks for sure, but it doesn't make sense.
All right, real quick, special teams. Bears kicker problem solved?
I think it's 18 in a row for Cairo Santos. I know the Vikings can't relate, but it's been a great luxury. And, they don't attempt super long kicks with him, which has helped that streak stay alive. He's hit a couple of 50-plus yarders that I don't think anyone was really expecting him to make, but he's been clutch, he's been consistent, and he's been great. They kick field goals over touchdowns a lot more than they want to.
I'm sure it won't surprise you that my work has forced me to look up which teams have rostered kickers on their practice squads. I would have expected the Bears to be one of those teams, though. I don't.
They did originally,
right? Well, I mean, wasn't it Cairo Santos who was the practice squad kicker? Yeah, and Eddie Pinero, but they didn't add any other practice squad kickers to replace him.
Correct. So Pinero got hurt. They called up Santos off the practice squad. Pinero was supposed to be back after about a 3-week injury. It was going to be a short-term IR, and he hasn't come back.
Yeah. Are you sure you're healthy? Why don't you take another week? This Cairo guy, he's got it.
Yeah, for sure. He may have very well lost his job. I mean, because if the Bears had brought him back off of IR, the Vikings or somebody probably would have signed him at this point.
Yeah, or somebody. But yeah, probably the Vikings. Yeah, okay. Also, assuming that Dan Bailey didn't have dead cap space, which of course he does. I mean, it's a kicker, right? So it's like $2 million. But like, what would you do in that situation?
I don't know that there's a perfect answer because we saw the Bears try absolutely everything last year, and it barely produced Eddie Pinero. So
it barely produced Eddie Pinero.
So like the whole kicker thing in the NFL is kind of a big scam where like
the kicker thing is a big scam. Kickers are a scam. Is that what the argument is?
Scouting kickers is a big sham.
Yeah.
That a sham over scam. Where like the former 49ers and Washington football team executive Scott McCloughan has said on podcasts before, he has no idea how to scout kickers. Doesn't know how to do it. Has other people handle that. So basically, NFL teams every offseason, they have those Kohl's kicking camps and stuff, and they just go to those and pick the winners, and that's how they decide who they're going to bring around. I mean, there's really a lot of teams don't have a rhyme or reason to it. So like, I don't have a rhyme or reason to it either. Like if they can't even figure it out, I'm not even going to try and figure out how to scout kickers properly. So yeah, I just keep bringing in as many bodies as you can because lottery tickets are, one of them's got to work.
I mean, undrafted kickers outperform drafted kickers, even on a rate basis, even if you account for the fact that undrafted kickers sign like way more often.
Well, it's like the Vikings tried Kari Vedvik, who seemed like the sure thing, right? I mean, like the Bears wanted him, and Bears fans were pissed when the Vikings got him, and that didn't work. And it's just like, and Dan Bailey had been so consistent. There's no one understands kickers. I don't think anybody like truly understands why and when and how they succeed and fail. And so much of it seems to be like mental as opposed to physical, and just not things you can watch on tape. So I don't know what to do.
All right, final special teams questions. Is Cordell Patterson going to run a touchdown against the Vikings on kick return?
I don't think so. I mean, he's going to take any kick he can get his hands on out of the end zone.
Yes,
But
the fuck he is.
I should mention for punt return, they've been kind of going around the docket on that because they originally signed Dwayne Harris as their punt returner. Then he tore his tricep. Then they had DeAndre
Rips
Carter.
to a real one, by the way. Dwayne Harris is a great returner.
Yeah, well, he was solid for like the game and a half he got to play, but then he fumbled on a play where he tore his tricep, and that was the last we've heard from him. And then they signed DeAndre Carter, who had been around the NFL quite a bit, and he got, I think, 2 or 3 games before he got COVID and has been on the COVID list for a couple of weeks now. And so now Anthony Miller is their punt returner, but sometimes they'll throw Darnell Mooney back there. I think Bears fans really want to see Eddie Jackson back there at some point. But for now,
really?
It's Anthony Miller. But Miller has bobbled 3 punts last week. He caught all of them, but like it was double catches on some of those fair catches, and everybody's kind of holding their breath. So a slight concern there for ball security because we know Anthony Miller in catching the ball has been inconsistent on offense and special teams.
Well, the one thing that the Viking special teams have done well, and it really literally is just one thing, is force some turnovers on punt return. They normally just give up yards on punt return. I don't even think it's been a net positive, but that is an opportunity. We'll see. Also, former Viking Kyle Slater and former Viking Rodney Adams on the practice squad. Did not think either of them would be the NFL at the moment. Just wanted to add that there. Also, I don't think Devontae Bond was he a Viking? Or am I comparing him to...
No, our lad says Buccaneers and Bears only.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think he was a Viking. Okay. Cool. Well, let's get a score prediction from you and then kind of let you go on your merry way.
Yeah, this one's tough for me because you get caught up in sort of the recency bias and how good they looked against the Houston Texans. But the Vikings are significantly better than the Houston Texans, but the Vikings just had a tough time with Tampa Bay. And of course they can't kick field goals to save their lives. So it's hard to know. I mean, I think the Vikings are going to win this game. It's hard for me to have too much faith in the Bears at this point, but I think it'll be close, and it wouldn't stun me if the Bears do win the game, but I would kind of put it at like 23-20 Vikings, something like that, where it does come down there in the fourth quarter. I think there's a lot of back and forth here, but I trust the Vikings more than I trust the Bears at this point.
Okay, so think about the sentence you just said and run it back to me.
23. Oh, yeah, the field goal's there. Let's see. Yeah, I was trying to see if I could math it. Some 2-point conversions would say like maybe it's 3 touchdowns with 2 2-point conversions and a missed 2-point conversion, or a missed extra point would be 8 and 8 and 6 would be 20. No, 8 and 8 and 6 would be 22. That's what I mean though about that score range where it's like 2 to 3 touchdowns for the Vikings and 2 to 3 touchdowns for the Bears, but it's a less than 7-point deficit. So how about 21-17 Vikings? How about that? Well, that would be 3 extra points, which is even asking a lot.
All right. Yeah, sure.
There's no score that satisfies the kicker situation at all. Because they got, 16 last week against it was 14 against Tampa Bay. They got 2 extra points, right? Or did they go for 2 on one time?
They went for 2.
Oh,
Dan Bailey missed the extra. They were just like, oh, no more of this. I believe Dan Bailey missed every kick that he attempted.
Man. Are they going to roll with him again? Like, is that the plan?
Yeah, wait, I mean, I asked you what to do, and you were like, I don't know. Well, guess what they did?
I don't know.
Yeah, right, yeah. So they had a kicker on their practice squad, and everyone was expecting after after the game that they would be promoting that kicker, and instead they cut him, which I think tells you a lot about how that guy must have been doing in practice.
Oh,
And so they tried out 2 other kickers, Taylor Bertolette, who what was that?
is that XFL kicker Taylor Bertolette?
Yeah, AAF and XFL, I think.
Of course.
Former Texas A&M. Probably telling that like 3 former minor league kickers have made it into the NFL and this guy hasn't. Yeah, he's like the most well-known of the minor league kickers. I don't know why he was not actually good in the AAF. They also worked out Chandler Catanzaro. They haven't signed either of them. So they currently do not have a kicker on their practice squad, nor have they signed any of the kickers that they've brought in for workouts. And anybody they sign, if it's from a workout, they're going to have to wait, I think, 10 days. So they wouldn't be able to have them for the game. And if they sign someone from someone else's practice squad, it's 5 days. And at this point, it means they wouldn't have them for the game. So it's almost certainly Dan Bailey, unless Britton Colquitt can do something we did not expect him to be able to do.
Well, you remember one time Dominican Sue kicked field goals. Maybe you got a defensive tackle that can do it.
Yeah, but Dominican Sue played soccer in college, right? Like, how many defensive tackles played soccer in college? I played soccer in high school. I'm sure he screwed around with the Nebraska soccer team at some point. But
BB seems like he could have been a high school soccer player, something like that.
Nah, he was hurt too often. Let's see, who on this list is plays? Dan Chisholm might have played soccer because I know he wasn't playing football.
As a goalie, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's what you need. You need the goalie. I would bring in an MN United kicker, but seeing how they do in clutch situations, I don't know.
Oh man, and I'm sure everyone in Minnesota has made some sort of Sarah Fuller reference that's just worn out and not even funny at this point. But
yeah, although mostly just the jokes usually on the Vikings. They're usually the butt of the joke. It's usually not like random female kicker X. So I get, at least from what I've seen. So at least you've got that going for you. It might be played and worn out, but it's probably not sexist.
That's like the Minnesota Vikings team slogan: played and worn out, but probably not sexist.
That's where we're at. All right. Thanks so much for coming on, man. You got anything you want to plug?
No, just 5 days a week on the Locked On Bears podcast, on Twitter at CoxSports1, and friend of the show. I should put friend of the Norse Code podcast in my Twitter bio.
Yeah, you got to put it there. Yeah, I mean,
people got to know. Yeah.
All right, thanks so much, dude.
Anytime.
All right, let's go to the mailbag, and the first question is from Raul, who asks, a silver lining from last week was Kirk's legs. He made a concerted effort to pick up easy yards, presumably against man coverage. Is this the missing piece to the let Kirk cook puzzle?
So actually, not all of his rushing yardage came against man coverage, although, the way that people talk about, running quarterbacks that pick up yards, they say you can't, you can't play man coverage against them because that's what you get. I could see, Kirk, having his legs be the check down, which is typically the advice you give to quarterbacks that run a 4.6 or even a 4.5 and not quarterbacks running, whatever Kirk ran, which I'm going to look this up right now because that sounds like a fun thing to find out. But yeah, no, I think that, having Kirk handle the ball a little bit more. Okay. So Kirk Cousins does not show up in the Draft Scout database. That doesn't seem right. Here he is. Okay. So he ran a 4.9. Jesus Christ. That's like Phillip River time. Yeah, so I would say that having his legs be the check down is sound based off of what we've been seeing and not what you typically see. But yeah, I think that the larger conversation about, whether or not this is, persistent sort of improvement that he's made and whether or not, this is good evidence that he has managed to increase his improvisational capability in some way. I think that is a fair conversation to have, and it looks like that's something he's done. He talked about it 2 years ago about, wanting to use his legs more, and then last year he did, and this year he's doing it way more, and it's been very successful for the Vikings. So, in terms of making Kirk Cousins a more effective quarterback or letting him have the ball in his hands in critical moments, you could say this is the missing piece. I don't know if it's You can't play man coverage against Kirk Cousins or he'll eat you up by running the ball. Also, I mean, he definitely looks like he runs faster than 4.9. I don't know what happened at that combine, or maybe he just got more athletic. He's like 31. He's feeling it. He's at his athletic prime. Who knows?
Yeah, that's exactly what happens to quarterbacks after they hit 31.
Yeah,
slowly.
Ask Dante Culpepper. All road is from there.
Exactly. Let's just do a direct comparison to him, shall we? Also from Raul, how does the lack of a second round pick influence your approach to the first round? Do you go for the boom or bust guy or the low ceiling, high floor guy? Or do you go for the highest position vision of all, quarterback?
This is actually also something that I answered on the not quite this question, but Kevin Cole asked me what would I do if I was in charge of the Vikings, and I was in a position above Spielman and Zimmer, and I could make a decision about whether or not to hire or fire them. And one of the answers that I gave was that I'd actually probably just trade for future picks. And one thing that you might be able to do is you might be able to trade down to a team that really needs that first round pick for whatever reason. And this is a strong might. Who knows if this is possible? But trade down, get a second round pick and a future second round pick. And that future second round pick you can then use to trade up into the first. And that might actually even be a low price for your first round pick, because typically future picks are discounted by a full round. So a second round pick is worth a future first sometimes. And so you might be able to figure something out. It could be a second round pick, a future first round pick, and then you also give away, one of the fourths that you have, or something like that. But I think that that's a possibility. Obviously, there's a lot of needs that the Vikings have, and so it's very difficult to be very comfortable trading away to get future picks. But my theory here is that I still don't know, if Kirk Cousins is the quarterback that you want to have going forward, but you don't have that choice because you're locked into him for a couple more years. And so drafting a quarterback right now, even in a quarterback-rich class like this, is a little bit untenable. But in a future draft, if you've got extra ammo, so you've got the first round pick next year, you've got a future second, you've got that second round pick, and then you're already your normal second round pick and all that. That's all tradable. If Anthony Harris walks, you might have a compensatory third, although I guess it wouldn't be that year, it'd be the year after. But, that would give you the ammo to be able to trade up in the first round and grab that quarterback. So that's something that you can think about is trading for future picks. But I would normally say, without that, I would say if a guy falls, yeah, I would take him with that first round pick, but he'd have to be a guy that is talented enough to have been considered a falling player, as well as somebody at a position of need. Otherwise, I would like to get more picks. And I think it's smarter for the Vikings and smarter in general to trade down and get more picks, as appealing as these first round picks are, because that lack of a second round pick does hurt. But it's also generally a good idea to have more picks. So there's that. I wouldn't get a boom or bust guy because, if you've got fewer dart throws, then I would want kind of a floor somewhere, unless, again, that boom is really remarkable. Like it's a quarterback like Zach Wilson or something, or I don't actually know who's in the draft, but like it might be a somewhat injury prone player that would be normally like offensive tackle number 1 or something. That would be the only boom bust scenario where I would do that. Otherwise, I think trade down. If I can't trade down, I'm probably getting the high floor guy because, again, you don't have that many dart throws. So the lack of the second round pick does influence the way I'm approaching that first round, but I think mostly because I think it supercharges some of the philosophies I already have about the draft, which is, trading down a little bit more often is better.
Next question is from Nolan, who asks, question for Arif's Corner. While it seems likely that Gladney and Dantzler are set, it seems equally likely that Boyd and Jones are not. What's the latest on the third cornerback spot for next year?
I guess Holton Hill's not in that conversation, huh? Which that sucks. I don't think Jones is really in the third cornerback conversation either. I think Chris Boyd is part of that conversation. And I know the fans are not going to be super happy about that, but I think he's playing better than a lot of third cornerbacks are. The fact that his hands are just not there is not great. But most of the things that make people mad about him are like role on special teams, right? Like, yeah, picks have fallen out of his hands, and even once that led to a touchdown. But that's like a fluke play. I'm not going to bag him too much for the touchdown just for not grabbing that pick. But there's just not that many third cornerbacks that are in position in coverage as often as he is. And again, he's not great, but I think compared to third cornerbacks, he's not, just awful. That said, I would like some more competition there. So, Chris Boyd knows the defense. That's not going to be good enough. I would say, kind of continue to see what you've got, and maybe draft a guy. But I think the best option here is to find a veteran that might know some principles of the Zimmer defense. Otherwise, see what you've got. I'm not really impressed with anybody they've got in their practice squad, which makes a lot of sense. But the players they've got right now are Curtis Riley, Tay Hayes, and Cordrea Tankersley. And Tankersley is super slow. I think he ran like a 4.65 or something at the combine. But yeah, I mean, none of these guys are really super appealing to me from a practice squad competition or a third cornerback competition perspective. And I think Chris Jones probably makes the roster next year, which would be pretty good for him. But unless Harrison Hand improves substantially, I would say probably in the third or fourth round, maybe draft somebody or sign a veteran. And I think signing a veteran is your best option there.
Also, one corner you liked in your corner coming out of the draft was Jalen Johnson. What do you think his role will be in coverage on Sunday?
So from my understanding, and I should have asked Lauren this question, unfortunately I didn't, so that's my bad. My understanding is that the Bears, because they don't seem to, and I'm double checking with PFF right now, but they don't seem to shadow their corners very often, is that his role is just going to be, what you'd expect the role of an outside corner to be. We did have a bit of a conversation about the nickel position. So Buster Skrine is on the injury report, so we may see Kindle Vildor in the nickel. But the point is that these players don't move inside like Jeff Gladney does in the nickel. So his role is going to be, outside corner. He had a really strong start to his year. After that, I would say it hasn't been, as good. His worst was obviously, when he's been up against some pretty high-powered teams like Tampa Bay. But for the most part, he's shown traits that would make him kind of a high-level corner. So his role is just going to be to lock down kind of the right side, the offense's left side as a corner. He doesn't go into the slot that often. He has never really lined up on the defense's left side. So it's just going to be what it is, right? So sometimes that's going to be on Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. And if the Vikings like a particular matchup for whatever reason, like if they think that Jalen Johnson is a little bit stiff, which is on the scouting report coming out, then they might line up Adam Thielen on him just because, he can take advantage of that. But I mean, obviously Justin Jefferson can do that too. So I don't know if there's a specific thing that he's going to do that is going to make the offense change their game plan, especially as you heard Lauren point out that, Kyle Fuller is a fairly talented cornerback in his own right. I'm actually curious about the Justin Jefferson, Kyle Fuller matchup because they're both unnaturally strong for their size. And I kind of want to see how that plays out, but that's more like an intellectual curiosity more than it is like, this is a good matchup the Vikings should target.
Next question is from Ryan, who asks, question for the next mailbag. Assuming we move on from Rudy in the offseason, is Tyler Conklin a serviceable tight end too?
I think he is if you run a lot of 11 personnel. I don't think he's a serviceable tight end too. And he can change my mind in the next couple of games. I'm certainly open to it because that was a really remarkable game he had last week. But I wouldn't think he's a serviceable tight end too if you're running a lot of two tight end sets. And I'm also still concerned, obviously, in that situation about tight end depth. Brandon Dillon is like your other, or Hale Henches, who I don't know if I think he got signed to the active roster. So, but I don't really like having that as your tight end 3 option if somebody gets hurt. We saw Irv Smith go down for a couple of games. We saw Kyle Rudolph miss a game. So good chance that somebody gets hurt next year at some point, even if it's just for one game. And I just don't love having another tight end that doesn't really have a strong history of production or that doesn't have a draft pedigree that you can trust that somebody thought that he was good enough to roster. So I would like maybe a 4th, maybe even a 5th round tight end to compete with Tyler Conklin. Rudolph seems to be expendable at this point. I don't know. I think hopefully the Vikings trade him because I think he'll probably get trade value, and the Vikings can probably get good trade value out of that. If they don't get any trade value out of him at all, I would say keep him despite that contract, because unless we see more from Conklin in the next couple of games, I would chalk that up to just being kind of a one-game thing, because I liked what I saw from him in camp, but I wouldn't say we saw so much from him in camp that, he seems like a tight end 2 in a 2 tight end offense.
Next question is going to be from Kyle Slaby, who asks, do the Vikings play down to their competition because Zimmer's preference to control the clock and limit possessions? That over-reliance on making the most of your chances feels risky when you coach a Minnesota team.
I don't think that's the reason, because reducing the number of possessions increases variance, and that tends to help underdogs. And that's true, right? That, one way that it can look like you're playing down to your competition is that you're giving yourself fewer chances to prove that you're better than your competition by limiting the number of possessions. So in that way, it can feel like that. But this has been like a consistent problem. And the thing about producing high variance matchups by limiting possessions is that you would not see this continued persistence. You just see a couple of games where it looks like that, and then a couple of games where it looks like the Vikings dominated with like an 8-possession game, which I guess has happened this year, but like not enough for you to be like, yeah, it's kind of random how they're going to do against bad teams. Right now, it seems like it's not random. They'll play worse against bad teams than they do against good teams. So I don't know if that's the reason. I wouldn't even know what the reason is. And for me to kind of answer this question a little bit more in depth, I'd first have to do enough research to say that they do, in fact, play down to their competition, which sounds like a fun article to write. If I can get enough teeth on that article and enough research, I might end up writing that. But it's worth exploring, and I'll probably jot that down because I think this is a question that's worthy of an article if I can find enough. So the short answer is I don't think that's the only reason, if it is in fact true that they play down to their competition. It certainly feels like it's true, because I think that because it feels like it's true, it must happen much more often than the limiting possession sort of thing plays out. And then a side note on this over-reliance on making the most of your chances, or yeah, that's exactly what you said. I wrote this in the mailbag. I essentially just kind of repeated what I said in the last podcast in the Athletic mailbag, and I got this interesting comment that I think characterizes the way the Vikings think about it, and I disagree with it, but I also think that it might kind of illuminate what the Vikings probably think, which is regarding clock management in the second half. I know I'm in the minority, but I don't think it was that crazy. Reef said it, and I've heard it a lot. You leave no margin for error if you chew up that much clock in a comeback attempt. True, but you've already used up your margin for error by digging a 17-point hole partway through the third quarter. You need to score touchdowns every possession after that and ensure the other team doesn't score touchdowns. Keeping the ball also ensures the other team gets fewer chances. The Vikings had first and goal at the 8-yard line with 10:30 to go in the game. Score a TD on that drive, and it's a 3-point game, assuming the PAT is missed, which funny, you have to assume that, but fair enough. Tampa kicks a field goal or punts in the ensuing drive. Minnesota gets the ball back when they have time for a drive to tie or win the game. And I get that, right? Like, I totally understand why you might think that's the case. But you think you're the better team, right? Even in a 17-point loss, right? Even if you're 17 points down, not only do you think you're the better team, right? Even though it's Tampa Bay and they're probably the better team, but you need to be the better team. You need to work with the assumption that you're the better team in order to have a 17-point comeback, and you need to be able to kind of trust that you're going to win out in those subsequent possessions. So the argument that they'll get more possessions too is appealing, but the problem is it's not whether or not they get to also get more chances to resolve a comeback. It's that you don't give yourself the ability to act on new information, because whether or not they get more possessions doesn't matter if they score on the next possession. And you need to know whether or not they're going to score on the next two possessions before you determine the number of possessions that you can have, right? And so you cannot make the determination on the number of possessions that you can have on the first possession because you don't have that information. So your kill the clock possession should be the third possession, not the first possession. And if you accidentally score a quick touchdown, boo-hoo, right? Like, at least you scored a quick touchdown. You're in a good spot if that's where you are. So I would say that that might characterize the Vikings' thinking. Again, I really disagree with that comment, but I think that explains why that argument is appealing. So I wanted to include that.
If you do write that article, can you quote me on the whole never underestimate the Minnesota Vikings' ability to play down to their opponent? Just want to be quoted
sure,
for an
why not?
Athletic article.
Yeah, I actually linked to the podcast in this mailbag. So let's see if my editor let me link it. Hold on.
He did actually. I read the article. I think I read it this morning, and
right,
it was
there
in
you go.
fact in there. So
All right, cool. Yeah, we're working our way into the Athletic audience.
awesome. Also from Kyle Slaby, March 1st of 2021. Kirk Cousins is summoned back to Mars by his superiors to file his report on his findings about Earthling culture. The Vikings can now void his contract, but per commissioner's rules, must replace him with Wentz or Trubisky.
Okay.
Who do you take, and do you accept the 21 dead cap?
Okay. I didn't do any research before this piece because I did a quick look over the questions, and I didn't think that I would need to look anything up to answer this. But I do actually want to look really quickly what Mitch Trubisky's cap hit is, because that does change things. It's nothing. Yeah, the answer is Trubisky. Yeah.
We can just make sure that there's absolutely nothing 15 yards out on that side of the ball.
Well, the thing is, okay, so if you replaced Cousins with Trubisky, you're not committing to Trubisky being the starting quarterback that year. All you're doing is committing to the fact that Trubisky is on the roster. And at it looks like $6.6 million dead cap, that's way better than Wentz's 20 point whatever million dead cap after the Eagles absorb his signing bonus. I would take the 6.6 million cap and then draft a quarterback. Like Trubisky's just a guy at that point. I mean, he doesn't cost anything. Plus, man, his cap. When was this doesn't seem right. It feels like he must have been drafted way later than he actually was years wise. But I guess not. It feels like he's been in the league for a little bit longer than he has been. Oh no, I'm looking at the wrong contract. Oh, that's great. Okay, that makes way more sense. So his cap hit next, it doesn't exist. They need to extend him.
Well,
yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I believe all Minnesota Vikings fans believe they should extend Trubisky until the eventual death of the universe. Right.
So if this is interesting. So if the Bears declined his 5th-year option. That's right. That was a whole story. Yeah. If the Bears extend him, let's say at twice his market value. So the over the cap valuation for Mitch Trubisky is $5.9 million. Let's say the Bears learned the wrong lessons from the Houston Texans game and extend him at twice his cap value. So that's $11 million. I would still take Trubisky over Wentz because that's a $20.5 million cap, and they're both useless, right? So you might as well get the guy that costs $10 million less. You get rid of Kirk Cousins' cap, which is like $30 million this year. So you net about $20 million in cap space, draft a quarterback, and you're good to go. And I don't know how you can draft that quarterback. Maybe you trade Kyle Rudolph for a 3rd. That seems a little bit high. Let's say it's a 4th, and you trade like all 4 of your 4th-round picks and a 2nd, and a 3rd-round pick, no 2nd, as well as your 1st. I think you can trade up for a quarterback. Now, obviously, you don't have anything else. You got like a 5th and a 6th. And now you're missing out on a tight end.
Your draft board looks a lot like the Saints on draft day every year.
Yeah, right, exactly. Or like the Bears have for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
But I still think you're in a better spot with like Zach Wilson or Trey Lance. Or Trevor Lawrence if he falls. Who knows?
Yeah, there we go. Because the idea of Trevor Lawrence falling is, I say this aloud, before the college football playoffs when he could potentially get hurt and all that. So I'm not saying he's going to. I'm just saying that this is the sort of thing that curses him out.
What level of injury would it take for him to actually fall? That's an interesting question, right? Like, would his leg have to get like chopped off? Because like Todd Gurley fell 3 spots after he tore his ACL, and he's a running back.
Oh yeah, that's right. Boy, you'd think something like an ACL, or that'd be the first thing you'd think, because like a collarbone's not going to do it for you. Collarbones heal. They seem to break easier after you break that, have that initial break, but after that, they'll heal. That's not going to be a problem. But that's got to be an off the field thing if he's going to drop.
Oh yeah, it would have to be an off the field thing. Yeah. Yeah, like I think the injury would have to be like this. This feels permanent. Would have to be the injury. Like,
yeah, like somebody
oh, his
ran
neck
over
does
his
what now?
Yeah, somebody ran over his foot with a car.
Right, exactly. You just be like, oh, okay.
Like he's got the
It's
flat.
pointed which way?
He's got the flat looking foot from Spaceballs after the statue falls down the guy's foot.
You're like a Looney Tunes foot. Yeah,
exactly. He's just like, oh, well, this is Squid. Yeah, I think that's the sort of it. And even then,
QB3.
Yeah, even then, QB3. Like,
I mean, John Bostic like punched Teddy in the face in the Sugar Bowl, right? And Bridgewater, like, I mean, I guess he fell, right? But he was a first round quarterback, even with the skinny knees. So I would take a lot for Trevor Lawrence to fall due to injury.
I mean, Bong Mask guy happened, and he still got drafted.
That was like draft day.
Well,
like,
yes.
If Trevor Lawrence bong masked on draft day, and we did not have the precedent of the previous bong mask guy,
true,
not having any off field, concerns since then, if we didn't have that precedent and Trevor Lawrence like bong masked on draft day, he would fall. Not like as far as Laramie Tunsil did, but he would fall. Like maybe they take like Justin Fields or they take Trey Lance or whatever, right? And maybe they take Zach Wilson. And they're like, oh, no, the bong mask had nothing to do with it. We were in love with Zach Wilson. He's our guy. Have you seen him play? And then like, pick 5, is Trevor Lawrence. And they're like, yeah, man, we're so lucky that the bong mask thing happened because who cares about that?
These are ideas that he could use in order to get away from Jacksonville.
He escapes the Jets
and the
Jaguars. Yeah,
you
should strategically release a bong mask video.
We're just trying to help, Justin. We're just trying to help. Andrew asks, do you think it's realistic that the current front office, coaching staff, and quarterback can resolve the game state inefficiencies, timeouts, clock management, run pass splits, 2-minute drill, etc., that we have seen over the past few years, or will it take a new regime to do so?
I think they can resolve one of these things, which is the 2-minute drill. The rest, I think, is kind of baked into the cake. But that said, I still kind of defend the existence of this coaching staff and front office, despite what seem to be these game-breaking problems, because it's like there's like 5 coaches that are better than Zimmer in terms of like win record, and all 5 of those coaches have had quarterback stability or Patrick Mahomes, right? And so that's just nuts to me that would happen with like a guy who's had Matt Castle, which admittedly was like for like 5 games, and Teddy Bridgewater and Case Keenum and then Sam Bradford and Sean Hill and Kirk Cousins. Like if you can continue to win under those conditions and more than, the guys that have like Drew Brees or whatever, like that's pretty interesting. So those are bad, right? But like, who else has those problems? Well, Andy Reid, right? And he just won a Super Bowl, admittedly, with Patrick Mahomes. But, like, he's been to another one, right? The Vikings have been to 2 NFC championship games despite this problem. So, yeah, those are bad, but they're also, like, probably less important coaching-wise. Even though it feels, like, really obvious. It's just the stuff that's super easy to identify. And I've talked about this before. But, like, I'm not sure that they can resolve those outside of that 2-minute drill thing. And it looks like, Cousins has been a lot better in 2-minute drill situations this year and then ever since the Broncos game last year. But yeah, I don't know. And hey, that Broncos game actually provides a good counterexample to what happens when you manage the clock effectively down 3 scores at the top of the third quarter. They scored quickly. And then, they scored on every single possession, right? You still need to be perfect. But the Broncos not only came back with a field goal in one of the subsequent possessions, but they actually, on the way back, also kicked another field goal. They just missed that field goal. But if they had made it, the Vikings still would have won. So, like, that's the value of being quick, is that you get another possession, right, to build that up. And that is a good example of not shooting yourself in the foot with effective game management by scoring quickly. I feel like it's almost never bad to score quickly. Like, the few examples where it's bad, the defense knows it and just lets you, right? Like, the best example is Brandon Jacobs, New York Giants, but it just happened. Who did it happen with? Which running back?
It wasn't Gurley, was it?
It might have been Gurley because it was at the Atlanta Falcons, right?
It was Gurley who accidentally tripped into the end zone.
Yeah, when I typed in Todd Gurley and then the A for accidental touchdown, and Google filled in the rest with accidental touchdown. So yeah, it was
Excellent.
definitely Todd Gurley. I feel bad for him, but it is funny.
Chris asks, what's up with the offense coming out with BB in the backfield and motioning him out when we want to run empty? And why BB and not literally any of the other receivers?
That's a really fascinating question. And by that I mean I have no idea what the answer is. But
That'd be a really fun question for Zimmer, like post game, and just have him just go, why are we doing that?
yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, more evidence of Gary Kubiak's love affair with Chad Beebe, right? I don't know, dude. That it doesn't make any sense. Like if they gave Chad Beebe the ball like once and he ran it and it was like fine, he ran it like well enough, I'd be like, okay, cool. I get it now. I guess he's Danny Woodhead or whatever tiny white running back we want to compare him to and exhaust our like repertoire of comps. But yeah, and maybe he'll throw the ball and we can call him Julian Edelman, right? But yeah, I have no idea because it doesn't seem like he should be a running back or would be a running back. And based off of his punt return ability, I don't know that he has running vision. I don't know what that does. So the idea for motioning a receiver into the backfield very often is, okay, well, we came out in a no back set, which puts them in dime, which is a good defense to run against because they can't, tackle a running back and they're not going to be able to beat our blockers because they just don't have enough linebackers on the field. Great. So we'll motion a receiver. He's good enough at running back that we'll do that. But then it's like Chad Beebe, and you're like, is the defense really going to change what they're going to do because Chad Beebe's back there? Like,
hey, you be careful because that man is a poor man's Peyton Hillis back there.
Yeah, he's a poor man's Peyton something. I don't know about Hillis. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. I can't think of a receiver that's more running back-ish, I guess. Well, actually, Dan Chisna, but he's not going to be on the field anyway. You can't do that. But I don't know that the Vikings have any receivers that are like, yeah, he could be a running back. Patterson's playing for the Bears now. It's the other team, right? So you can't.
The only way it could be more obvious that he's a decoy is if he literally had LED lights blinking on his jersey that just spelled out the word decoy.
I feel like this is like the Michael Boone dream role, right?
It should be. They're not going to give him the ball anyway.
Right. Yeah, if they're not going to give him the ball, they might as well have a running back there that can run routes, right? And he might as well run routes almost as well as Chad Beebe. He can catch better than Chad Beebe. So he's got that going for him.
Probably has better ball security than Chad Beebe.
Right, yeah. So, why not just have Michael Boone back there? At least defenses will believe he might grab the ball. I don't know that any defense has thought, oh, he's back there? No, prepare for the run.
we need, hold on. We need to keep a spy back here. Just in case Chad Beebe breaks one off.
He's going to get like a 25-yard run and we're never going to acknowledge it.
No, never. In fact, we're talking all this crap now. If that happens this upcoming game, you and I are just going to ignore that play completely.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and then somehow they got 25 yards downfield for the win.
Yeah, my Hulu skipped that for some reason. Did your
Yeah, I am going to ask YouTube TV for a refund. What was that?
I mean, you were actually at the stadium for this one. Did the lights go off? How did the Vikings advance 25 yards there?
Yeah. Not only did the lights go off, but blackout curtains just rolled down and stopped any light from the outside coming in. It was very weird.
Yeah, it was so.
I didn't even have this.
After the game, they found just hundreds of thousands of bird carcasses that had just all attacked the stadium all at once. But only attacked the areas where light was coming in. So I don't know. I don't know
Very
what happened.
weird. Very weird.
Really, US Bank Stadium should be better prepared for that. Anyway, the Vikings ended up getting 25 yards on that play that didn't happen. And we can just move on. Let's go to Anton, who asks, keeping this simple, who will enjoy this Sunday?
Cordero Patterson and his family.
That is simple and accurate. Draw Play Dave asks, would you prefer this team squeak into the playoffs or not?
Oh, wow, what a great question. I am strongly anti-tank, even though it doesn't make sense. So yeah, let's get them in the playoffs. Plus, I can up my numbers at The Athletic if the Vikings are still relevant. So let's do that.
I want to see the number 7 seed play the number 2 seed and knock them out. And at the moment, I got a really good feeling
Saints, right?
about the Saints hitting the number 2 spot.
Gosh, I can't, like. Does the Saints want to play anyone less?
No, and that's why it has to happen. That's why it has to happen. This is ordained. Like this is divine will. If this doesn't happen, it just goes to show that the Saints pissed off the divine the divine beings by whatever scandal they got themselves into over the offseason. Like this is it. This is perfect. This is the will. This has to happen. And I really want the Vikings just to like limp into that 7th seed just for that week. I don't even know if obviously I'd watch the game, but I don't even know if I'd want to watch the game. I just want to watch all the Saints fans for that week just be trounced by Vikings Twitter. Be like, hey, you remember this one? And this one? This still wasn't really a push off. Do you remember when? Do you remember this? I actually have a phone case that encapsulates this particular moment. Do you remember? My favorite. Do you remember when the ref just casually threw the flag? Like it didn't matter when Diggs tossed his helmet 10 yards in celebration. Like, are you not entertained? And the ref just casually just throws it up into the air and watches it waft down to the ground. Remember that feel-good moment? It doesn't matter. The Saints would absolutely decimate the Vikings likely in that situation, or the Vikings would play up to the situation and find a way to stop Taysom Breeze. But it would just be entertaining. It feels like this is something that has to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Nick asks, I've been listening to a podcast on scandals. What is the biggest scandal in Vikings history outside of the Love Boat?
So that's kind of interesting. Probably the two that I would think about are Adrian Peterson. I mean, they literally just lost sponsors over that, and some of them they haven't gotten back, right? Which, like, the sponsors saw their names behind Adrian Peterson and behind Ziggy Wilf as they were explaining everything that was happening, and they were like, "Yeah, no, we can't. No, absolutely not."
Wasn't that at the hotel? Like,
yes.
Oh my!
Just brutal.
I had forgotten about that exact moment in Vikings history and how they were like, no. You get our picture off of SportsCenter now.
Right. And then the other one has to be when they like piped in crowd noise, which is like more of a Falcons scandal than a Vikings scandal, but the Vikings definitely did it.
I think I've said this on the show before, so apologies if I've said this on the show before, but there was a time when I was working for a company that was moving equipment from the Metrodome over to the new baseball stadium. And they are also the company that does the Yellow Line, or did the Yellow Line on TV. Right. And in the process of getting all this equipment, we ended up into the sound room of the Metrodome. And there's this big patch panel up on the wall next to all this equipment. And it's very, very well labeled. And it includes, like, a patch panel, if you're not familiar, is that thing that looks like an old telephone board in a recording studio or in an audio space. And it shows where you can route audio. So if you're in a studio, it can go like, oh, this is reverb is coming here and it's coming back on this channel and whatever. But it also can help move sound from, if I'm getting this input, I can move it into these speakers. And it was very clear to me when I looked at that setup and I went, oh yeah, this would take no effort at all in order to play the background music. Like it would take absolutely no effort at all to be piping in the crowd noise for this. Absolutely no effort at all. You could even just do a loop of the current crowd noise and make it louder. I was like, oh, oh no, this is bad. I'm going to leave this room now because I don't want to be a part of any conversation with a Falcons fan. This is bad. I'm trying to think of, like, obviously Bounty Gate, but that was more of a Saints thing than a Vikings thing. There was a question, like somebody was actually responded to that question on Twitter and said, does the Herschel Walker trade count?
Oh
boy,
that's good point.
I mean, that's good. I mean, Dante Culpepper forcing his trade through the newspaper, I thought that was always impressive.
That's a good point. Yeah.
The Wizinator,
that one's great.
That was more funny, but there were again from the guy who had written in Gustav Johannesson, the Deweys in the 80s. I can't remember which. It's not Carl Eller. I'm just trying to remember the name of the Viking who kept getting a Dewey. He's like a Vikings legend. I think he's in the Ring of Honor. And it seemed like every other year he was getting a Dewey for something in the cities.
Yeah, Jim Marshall?
No.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. I don't know.
I say it wasn't. Yeah, I'm trying to remember, but it definitely is. It's not Donovan McNabb. For whatever reason, that was the first one that came up on my Google search, was Donovan McNabb. No, that is not a former Vikings legend.
What are you talking about, man? He's still shooting hoops in Blaine. Come on. Yeah,
I'm sure he's quite popular there. Next question is from Don from Ohio, who asks, what does an Arif wreath smell like? There's a wonderful pun.
Yeah, we got a response from, what was his name?
I'm actually pulling it up right now.
He said sandalwood, which yes. I thought was great.
Yep.
That was phenomenal.
It was Matt McKeon. It was sandalwood and Pacific Northwest sea salt.
Incredible. Which Matt McKeon, I think, is already a patron and all that. So.
He is, yes. So
fantastic, great branding, Matt McKeon.
Kudos to you. The second question, Arif and I were wrestling with in the pre-show, trying to figure out exactly what was being referenced, because Don from Ohio has been doing movies lately, and somebody had written in a potential one as to what this is referencing, but it's, hey guys, I applied for a supervisor position at my work yesterday. I'm very familiar with the area since I worked in it for a year with the other supervisors in the area who have gone to bat for me for my prior promotion. I'm the type of guy who leaves no stone unturned. It's a fine autocorrect there. When it comes to being prepared for an interview, my question, when should I bring up the photos of the plant supervisor who's giving the interview with the person who isn't their spouse? I feel like coming out right away with it undermines my ability in nailing the interview and showing them I am more than capable of doing the job. At the same time, I want to show him I'm all business. Any advice?
So we're trying to figure out what movie this is, and we're obviously too dumb or not culturally sound enough to be able to answer this. So I actually don't know.
I wanted it to be like Secret of My Success for some reason, but not quite 80s enough. Somebody had suggested that partially this could be Men in Black, like the person who's on their desk, but not the person that they're interviewing. But it doesn't fit for other purposes.
I don't. That doesn't. Unless that's like the backstory for like Tommy Lee Jones before or something. But I don't know.
I'm not on board. In any case, don't do it. It's not a good idea.
Don't do it.
As far as James's employment corner is concerned, I would suggest you not do this. I have recently, not for myself, but I have recently looked into the job market at the moment for people who do not currently have a position, and it's ugly as hell. Do not do this. It could have grave consequences. Andrew Shad asks our final question of the episode. He says, for the relationship plus pet corner, my girlfriend, that's just wordy. My girlfriend and I currently have one cat and live in a 2-bedroom apartment. Recently, the cat has been all at all our windows trying to make friends with the neighbor cats. My girlfriend says this is proof we need a second cat. I say the apartment is too small. However, recently his tiny adorable his tiny adorable meows at the windows are becoming too much to handle. I am also breaking down to getting a second cat. So, number 1, is a 2-bedroom apartment big enough for 2 cats? Number 2, would we then become that couple with the cats? Number 3, how do I not give in to adorableness?
So first of all, to answer number 3, you're screwed, buddy. It sounds like you're getting that cat. Second, it kind of depends on the relationship the 2 cats have. Like, obviously, you don't know yet because you don't have the second cat. But generally speaking, if you've got 2 bedrooms, you can have 2 cats. Like, the idea, like, I think, so long as both bedrooms are like usable, right? But the general rule that people seem to have, and it's not even that great of a rule, is 1 bedroom per cat. But obviously, different size bedrooms and different size requirements. But even like a small apartment is good enough for 1 cat. So having a 2 bedroom should be good enough for 2 cats. But if the cats can't coexist with each other, then you need, and if you have 2 cats, you need a significantly larger space. And I've been in that situation where my roommate had a cat, and our cat, which is not the current cat that we have, just would not get along. And so luckily there was just so much space in where we lived that it didn't end up being that big a deal. But you need a lot if they don't get along. But if they do get along, it does not take a lot of space. And if you've got 2 cats, they can share a litter box. So you don't even need to have, a ton of boxes around the house. Again, it really does depend on the 2 cats. So yeah, I didn't even have to ask my girlfriend for this one, who is the actual certified pet expert. This is just a thing I know now.
So here's the thing. I don't like cats because they try to kill me. Not physically, but I am deathly allergic to them. So my response to this is going to be colored as such. In order to avoid getting this additional cat, you really do have to just embrace your inner terrible person. And just remind yourself that getting 2 cats is just a gateway into getting 3. Because
that's not true at all.
If those 2 cats don't get along, you could, why don't we get a 3rd one, honey, to get some sort of an enforcer between the 3?
No one thinks like that.
Oh, they don't think like that until they have 15 cats.
These 2 cats can't get along. Let's bring a 3rd into the equation.
Oh,
maybe people do communication skills.
People do that with kids all the time. Why would they? Humans create bonds with anything. This is not unheard of. People do this with kids all the time. Oh, we screwed up with these 2. Let's see if we can get a 3rd and get it right. This is something that would end up happening with the cat thing here. If you want to avoid being that couple with the cats, I know couples with the cats. They end up in their Christmas cards, and I'm not knocking the friend in particular. That I'm really not trying to knock them. That sends out the cats with the Christmas cards. But I'm saying that's what's coming. If you get that second cat, you are not just dipping your toe in this.
That's not true. Most people with 2 cats don't end up getting a 3rd cat. I know a ton of people that have 2 cats. Only one of them ended up getting a 3rd cat, but also they own a house. So they also lost one of the cats for a while and weren't that concerned about it. And I guess he came back. So, all's well that ends well. But it's a couple of months. I was like, you sure this isn't a problem? Oh yeah, we just leave food out and someone eats it. We hope it's him. Oh, okay. That doesn't seem great.
I bet they'd be great parents. They should just embrace the situation, have kids and be miserable like the rest of us, and just accept that that these things are going to last longer and are going to require a little bit more water and time and effort. So just
just a little bit more water for kids. Yeah.
I had joked for years the reason I didn't want kids at that particular moment was because I was afraid that the same thing was going to happen to them was the same thing that happened with all the plants I had, and that I was just going to forget to water them. And just the look of horror from people No, I realize they need more than water. I'm just trying to make a terrible point.
And then one thing I'll add here is that if you do bring in an additional cat, you should find some way to create some vertical space. Like we've got cat shelves and stuff like that. And the way that cats sometimes deal with the space is that they seek verticality. So extra shelves or something. That's just another thing I would just add to that.
You're gonna end up a cat person. I'm sorry, but that's what's gonna end up happening.
One cat. They're asking about 2 cats. I don't think they're going to get a third if they get a second, unless they move.
Well, if they move, they're going to end up getting 3 cats. You're not going to be at that place forever. You're going to end up getting a 3rd cat out of this.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I'm siding with your girlfriend in this argument, but I'm not sorry because it means you're getting another cat.
I didn't used to hate cats. It's just when my allergies caused me to, caused my throat to shrivel up and want to, no longer work. I used to be like a fairly decent human being.
And it changed your opinion on the personalities of cats too?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Cats know that I am ridiculously allergic and immediately want to come up to the giant, want to go up to the hill giant.
They just know you're a big friendly giant. They don't know anything about the medical condition that you have that makes it intolerable for you to be around them.
Wrong.
Big friendly giant James.
So my parents, bless their hearts, have 2 cats and a dog. And all 3 of them are giant fur balls, which also means I can be over there inside the house for maybe an hour before I have to leave and use my inhaler and use Claritin D and all that, which has led me to believe they just don't want me to visit anymore. For the record,
James and the giant fur ball.
The oldest cat that they have had since I worked at Amazon in 2000 and I want to say 2 or 2003. So it's an old cat. This cat knows me. We've met. Every time that cat comes up to me, I immediately I lift it up with my foot, not like I'm kicking it, but I lift it up with my foot, with my shoe, and I move it over.
I just push it footwise. I'm not kicking it.
I'm not kicking it. I'm not launching it. It would be easy to do so, but I restrain myself. And I just lift it up and I just move it. I shoo it away. I shoo it away. After this number of years, one would think that a cat would realize, no, I don't want you anywhere near me. Instead, it sees a hill giant and goes, I want to rub up against that. And I go, no. The youngest cat, the male cat.
Your issue with the reason you don't like cats is because they're friendly with you?
They should know by now, especially the ones that have...
No, they don't have medical degrees. They're cats.
No. Cats have the ability to figure out ways to be like the worst thing that they can possibly be. They can plot against you, and don't say that they can't because it's true.
This because of your experience of physically being around cats.
Yes.
Yeah. Cats are the worst. They know exactly how to screw you up once one entered my physical space. That's your argument.
After 16 years, a dog can learn behavior after 16 years.
Well, cats are notoriously difficult to train. I'll give you that.
Yeah,
that's different than cats just being mean to you. No reason.
Cats can look at you and just do the whole I'm going to ruin that man's whole career, and just walk up to you. And
cats are tweeting this you at you.
Exactly. This is how we started, and this is where we're at. And it's me in the ER with the breathing apparatus and trying to get the steroid treatment to make it so that my lungs don't close up again. Merry Christmas, Mom and Dad. Yeah, it's that sort of situation. So it's
your parents that hate you, not the cats.
Things can be 2 things, Arif. Things can be 2 things. And with
this
that,
is general advice, by the way, it's the parents that hate you, not the cats.
This is a fantastic pre-Christmas episode too. Norse Code really is coming full circle on episode 360. It's great. that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Hopefully it was more, hopefully you're able to enjoy it more than I have been able to, whenever I'm around any cat. Arif, what do you have to plug?
I did not write very much this week at all, so which I'm happy with, honestly. So I talked about that mailbag and a couple of answers I had. This is like maybe my most thorough mailbag ever, so be sure to check that out over at The Athletic. I also did Players of the Week. I did not check the comments of that, so if I made a mistake in this week's Players of the Week, I've got no idea. Check those out. I don't really have much else. And the podcast I was on with Kevin Cole, I thought it was entertaining and enlightening because he was an analytics guy. So we were able to talk about, Ravens, Browns, and other stuff as well as the Vikings.
Well, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. For Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will be back next week to talk about the result of the Bears-Vikings matchup. But until then, please remember that all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci. And we will be back next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's official Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can also find his written work at theathletic.com. I am your podcast host and producer, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can make a recurring monthly contribution by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. A donation of $3.50 per month does get you bonus material from the show and much more. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.
Anthony Lynn was asked after the game about the timeout he took before Michael Badgley's second miss when he iced his own kicker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously the Chargers beat Aston. Anthony Lynn did not initially recall the timeout he took before Michael Badgley's second miss, but he said he probably called it to give his field goal operation time to get set up. Man, you don't even remember the timeout. You only get 3 of them.
That's actually not terribly surprising because you hear coaches say all the time, I don't remember that exact play, or I don't remember that exact moment. Now it's more extreme with timeouts, obviously, because there's only 3 of them.
Like, I don't remember that play is I don't remember watching something someone else did. But like you called the timeout.
I mean, so I've got this medicine I have to take twice a day, and I never forget it, but I have to say aloud to myself as I take it, the answer is yes. That way I remember that I did it. Maybe he just forgot to say something in his head that said, I took the time out.
He needed to like spin the top Inception style.
Exactly. And see, and see which way it landed or if it stopped at all. Yeah, that's why are you being so mean to Anthony, to Lynn and his totem? Like, this is...
You're right. I should be nicer to the coach of the 5'9" Chargers, of the best rookie quarterback in the NFL.
It was just it was a wonderful showcase of a million different things. And we're learning more and more about the things that it showcased now. That is fantastic.